Wanted to catch up with you a little bit on the agenda, which really isn't going to look a lot like what we printed for you. So thing one, I wanted to start with the homework assignment that I gave you last night related to reminding us of a time when your idea was not in the majority, did not prevail, but you left the council meeting, the council experience, feeling comfortable and like you had been heard. So we'll do that first. We'll take volunteers as we did the other night and hear from you all on that. Then would love to know if anyone has any just reflective thoughts on last night's conversation above and beyond what you already said. Don't need to belabor that. If you said the things last night, great, but if you had any additional reflections or specific questions for the directors that are here, we can take some time there. Then we are going to visit a little bit about study sessions, and staff, who's always ever so prepared, has a little packet of things. And then I want us to spend the time on those additional topics that you all sent by email. Did have run request that the homelessness one, which might be big, that we do that one last to make sure we get to the other ones. If you are wondering what the other ones are, I will tell you again what we heard. Aaron just wants to talk about a procedural thing about what happens if both the mayor and the mayor pro tem have ditched out and are not attending council meetings. What shall you do? Is that what you said specifically?
I would prefer to avoid the term ditched out, but thank you, Heather.
I mean, right, I think it is, right? Sometimes I take liberties, but not always. And then we wanted to just check in a little bit on the charter committee items as well. And so we can do that one. Then, and I'm sort of agnostic on the point thereafter, Hill Mobility. Natalie's here to visit with us about that one. I thought we could do that one next. And then planning approvals might be separate from the bigger PDNS issues. Do those go together, do you think? Yes?
I figure since Rachel and I lifted up that sort of PDNS piece along with homelessness in our hotline, I'm certainly comfortable based on the conversation we had with Brad last night and just sort of those really quick acknowledgments of those issues and where we're going to go. I personally feel pretty comfortable with where Brad wants to go with that and acknowledges the input that we're going to bring. So I feel good not giving too much time on that.
Okay.
But I just want to check in certainly with my fellow colleague who wrote the hotline with me to allow more space perhaps also for homelessness and other things. I think there's going to be some greater need for oxygen on some of those issues. So I'm happy to table that for a later date, and kudos to Brad for addressing it rather quickly.
Being awesome. Rachel, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think maybe we could do a nod of 5 just because Brad said he would look at it if there was support, and I don't think that we indicated
Which thing in particular do you want to get in?
planning.
But what are we nodding of fiving about?
Staff taking a look at what ordinances we might want to change. Do we have a nod of 5 from council to kind of prioritize that as a?
Okay.
I don't. Sandra just gave me a look, or a indication, whatever the right terminology is.
Yeah, let me think about that. I think this is a retreat. Thanks for that opportunity. Let me think about that for a minute, because this is a retreat, and typically I think that would really be considered kind of an action item.
Oh, we do that a lot at retreats.
So,
I know we
Can I make a friendly amendment
Yeah.
for Rachel? We meet on Thursday, and we can bring that up at Matters and just take care of it there.
yes, it may come up again under the homelessness discussion though, so maybe having an answer.
Let's
What?
play
That's a
it
good
by
point.
ear.
Play it
point.
by ear if there is an easy answer.
Yep.
And I guess while my microphone's on the green, I did not have the sense that we would push homelessness to the end. So I don't know if I misunderstood you. I don't know where that
I
request
had a
came
request
from.
that we get through the other things first because they might be less time consuming, to make sure we have enough time for that one, but not let that one take all the time.
So
The other ones I think are fairly straightforward. I think it'll be okay.
Can I add too that if we deal with some of the other matters, like for example, if we're not going to speak about PNDS, I'd be happy to let Brad go, for example. So you're here for the
Planning
long haul.
approvals, but Bob had planning approvals.
Mi-
feel about that
Mine,
one?
which was written before they posted their hotline, was very similar to what they ultimately put on the hotline.
Great.
So I'm perfectly fine,
Glorious.
not talking about
So
more
free
time.
dinner for Brad and he gets to go home?
I'm going to stay.
Brad's going to be here.
Okay.
I guess that I feel like homelessness is such a unwieldy topic, and such an important topic for the community and one that we hear so much about that if we're going to talk about it, like, I think it could almost eat up the whole time. So I wouldn't want to push everything else and then we end up with a 25-minute discussion on
Sure.
it. So we'll defer to colleagues on their preference, but
Okay.
I would probably do it first.
Let's hear from the rest of the crew. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, just on the retreat and making actions, like we can't make a formal action, but we've always given direction at retreats, so maybe we can think of it that way. Not a 5 is maybe a little more formal, but I think we can always give council direction, and like, we can nod our heads, but not have a nod of 5, and that might thread the needle.
Don't officially count how many of them are nodding, is what I guess I'm hearing. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, I just had a question about what we are deciding on. So are we asking PNDS to go and look for changes that will make things easier, or is it more that if things are coming up in the course of, you know, the work that you're typically doing that you notice, then those are things that we might work on? But what I have concerns about is that PNDS has an incredibly large work plan and a lot of our work plan priorities. And so I think I'd be curious to know.
Okay,
like,
so
how
I'm
much
going to
time.
ask you not to have the conversation. I'm just trying to get the sequence of things. So it
Gotcha.
sounds like we should
Okay.
spend at least a couple minutes figuring out what you want to do with this one. So checking camping ban enforcement, does that go with homelessness? Are they together? So that's so that ends up, Rachel, I think it's going to be okay. There aren't that many items. So if we do the absent ditching mayors situation, then the charter committee check-in, then hill mobility, then a quick check-in on this PDNS, what are we saying about that? And then all that's left is homelessness and camping ban. I think you'll get a good couple hours left for that. You cool? You'll be mad at me later if it doesn't work out, okay? She's like, oh yes, you can count on that, Bergman. I'm watching you. Sweet. All right, council, you comfortable with that? Okay. I didn't count how many of them are nodding, but it was a good number. Ma'am.
So one of the things we had talked about and talked to others about during the retreat planning was having this discussion about what else, like what are the things we want to have deeper discussions about after tonight,
Yep.
so that we can try to schedule that in. So is that still part of this? Is that
It's part of the
kind
study session
balanced? Is
conversation.
it-
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then the other thing I captured last night, and maybe this relates to the PDNS thing, is, you know, could we just have a regular check-in from all the departments on how things are going? And I think that was specifically, it came up as part of the ordinance conversation, if people have come up with other ideas. So we can check in on that. And then we might want to just debrief at the end of the night, if we have time, how this retreat planning conversation went, and if we could have done better or differently to have it be a more satisfactory experience. So that's roughly the plan. Somewhere in the middle, I think we should take a break, stretch some legs. All right, so with that as a rough plan, I would like to start with your homework assignment. And for those of you who are not talking during one of your colleagues' delivery of their homework assignment, I will ask you to give them your full attention and not be rehearsing your own remarks in your mind. It's a common thing to do, and mostly it works out okay because you can kind of wing it and pretend like you were listening. But in this particular case, the whole point is to do the listening. So really, we'll ask you to give it your all to really hone in. So do I have a volunteer to go first? Hey, Bob Yates, tell me about a time.
I did think about this ahead of time, so I can now actively listen after I finish talking. So all my colleagues know that oftentimes you almost always you come into a meeting and you have a pretty good idea if you're going to win or lose the proposition that's before us. You know, you kind of have an idea. And so in my mind, there's kind of 3 approaches you can take to losing. One is you could just kind of quietly vote and be outvoted, which is fine. Second is you can get like really pissy and have a nice long speech and tell your colleagues why you think they're really, really dumb and voting the way they are. And we've all done that, including me. And then the third choice you have, I think, is you could say, you know, guys, I know I'm going to get outvoted here, and I think you're making a wrong decision, but I'd like to help you improve the thing you're working on. And it's not going to change my vote. I'm still going to vote no. But I'd like to make some suggestions to you all to help you come up with a better product. And when I have done that in the 7 or so years I've been on council, I always feel really good at the end of that night, like, you know, like I helped. And I always feel listened to because people know that, like, I'm not a threat anymore, right? I've already cast my vote the other direction, and so I get paid attention to. And I'll give you a recent example. Last year, you all remember that we were trying to decide on even year elections, And I was going to vote no on that one, but I knew that most of the rest of the folks were going to vote yes, and that was fine. But I thought the way they were going about it was a little bit wrong, and so I said, hey, folks, I'm going to vote no on this, but let me help you make this a better product. And after a few weeks, they ended up in that place, and I felt really good about that. I felt listened to. I do remember that night that I was sitting next to Mark, and Mark was going to vote with me in the minority, and he kept kicking me under the table saying, stop helping them, stop helping them. They're making a horrible decision. But I did want to help my colleagues because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? And we all want the best products, even if we're on the losing end or the winning end of a particular vote. And so I think it ended up being a better product, and I really appreciate my colleagues listening to me that night.
So this was a challenging homework assignment for me because I'm not very good at remembering these types of things. I actually wipe my brain clean of any sort of and so I do remember one instance though where I was the only, and I can't remember what the topic was or who said this, but I was the only person voting against something. And the person who had brought it forward sort of listened to what I said in terms of why I wasn't going to vote on it, or, vote to approve it, and asked if there was a modification that could be made that would bring me into being able to support it. And I believe I said no. But I still really appreciated that because my vote wasn't necessary to pass it, and still making that effort, I think was meaningful. Kind of in line with Bob's.
Okay. Yes, I thought about this a little bit. In 7 odd years on council, I've been in the minority side of a vote many, many times. And I think for me, it's actually been an internal thing about whether I leave the meeting comfortable. That if I feel like if I feel comfortable in my choice, and I feel like I said a few words that represented my position pretty well, and as long as no one was like actively mean to me, which actually has happened a couple of times, like where somebody said something really nasty about me personally. Other than that, I will generally walk home and be like, all right, wasn't in the majority, but it's fine. Feel comfortable with it.
Anything in particular that you can recall, Aaron, that made you feel heard? That you weren't just disagreeing into the wind? Or is it really just an internal conversation you have with Aaron and these folks don't influence particularly your sense of being heard?
I mean, there have been so many of them. Occasionally, somebody may say, "Well, that's a good point," or what have you. But actually, as long as somebody doesn't single me out and say, "Well, that thing you said was really stupid," no, I think I'm pretty comfortable.
This was actually kind of difficult, and the reason is I've been on the majority side of a lot of votes this first year. No. Can I stop listening to him? But it's always like trying to. So it's there's connotation to that, but I was really trying to dig. But
It'll come.
I'm sure. Oh, I know it will. Oh, I know it will. And maybe I'm burning all of the good juju early, and then it comes back to bite. But one instance where I definitely was not in the majority that I recall was with the conversation regarding West Pearl, and that was an interesting one because there wasn't necessarily a sense of feeling heard as much as there was a frustration of feeling powerless. And that was a really odd sensation of being an elected official and having zero power to affect the outcome of an issue of great importance in the community, where we had heard a tsunami of wanting change or wanting something different. So that was interesting. That was a hard one to sort of swallow because that was not an expectation I felt that I would get as an elected official dealing with city issues. But I think at the end of it, what I think was heard was not just me, but the community. And so we have a process that is going to get us, hopefully, to a comfortable place for all sides with regards to West Pearl and other pedestrianization. So anyway, that was one instance where that was the case. And I agree with Aaron. I don't really care that much about whether I feel heard or not. That doesn't weigh on me. I compartmentalize stuff pretty quickly and then just move on to the next opportunity to have success. I don't let that weigh down because I don't want it to taint the next opportunity to then be on a positive working environment to like get the next thing done. So I try to close it off pretty quick.
Colloquying off of that. So are you saying that the West Pearl vote, we were wrong and you were right? Is that what you were saying on that?
I was in the minority.
Just kidding. To me, you know, my regular job is sales and marketing. So to me, council reminds me a lot of my regular job in the sense that we're 9 of us and we have to talk at least 4 other people into agreeing with us. And a lot of times, I don't know if the community knows this, but you have your one-on-one talks with different people. And what I like to do, because I learn better listening than reading 400-page packets, is to ask a lot of questions to people that specifically disagree with me. So I like to figure out if I'm understanding it, and then sometimes I don't think I'm right, and then often I need more information to make a decision. And that's how I make a decision at work, when I have the best decision with the most information. So that's why it's kind of sales. And so as far as when you're in sales and you don't get the sale, you have to move on. You can't just sit there and cry. I mean, you can cry. And when I first started, I did cry, like sometimes for 2 weeks at a shot, to be honest. But anyway, that's not the way to do it. So for me, I've never gotten hurt because I always feel heard when I have the one-on conversations with people. I also listen to people when I have those conversations. And even in council, I listen to people and I'm always like pulled, as people know, like, oh my gosh, yes, no, because I'm one of my, I don't have, you know, my few good qualities is that I'm able to listen and till the very end. And then I'm like, what do I do? So my problem isn't that I'm ever hurt, because that's the way it goes. I mean, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And even when I have so much trust with my the rest of my fellow council people that if I lose, I trust that they had their very good reason why they voted that way, and I'm going to move on. And one thing Junie Joseph said to me at the very beginning when we first got on was, this is a Junie Joseph-ism, is she says, that was Tuesday night at the time, I let Tuesday night stay at Tuesday night, and I wake up on Wednesday, I don't even think about it. And I always remember that, and always will do that. So I will end this soliloquy with this final thought, and that is, my biggest problem is I will wake up in the middle of the night, or let's say 3:58 a.m. and like, oh my gosh, I think I voted the wrong way. So for me, I'm my worst, you know, I'm the one that is the hardest to live with, because I'm so pulled by people's excellent ways of looking at things, and at the very end, I'll often just rethink my vote and wish that I can change it. That recently did happen, so.
You know, soliloquy rhymes with colloquy.
I can go. And I wondered if Matt wanted to clarify one thing from his, which is, I'm trying to like throw him a rope here to unhang himself. But I don't think that you were upset by being in the minority, right? You were upset that it was not council's decision. It was in staff's hands. Is that accurate? Not everybody maybe knows that, so I just wanted to clarify that for you. Nobody's fault. Just that I think the powerlessness in that scenario, because I felt that a bit too, was that it was just not a council. It was an administrative decision, an administrative function. So that was, maybe you didn't feel like you hung yourself, but in case anyone else did. No, he had moved on. I guess he did. That's nice. So I spent most of my first 2 years in council in the minority on, Bob's nodding vociferously there. And I guess I always felt like it wasn't really this body's job necessarily to hear or validate me, because we're all elected and we have a job to do, and our job, I think, is to represent our constituents. So I don't, I mean this inoffensively, I don't care too much what you all think of me, or if you agree with me, or you're going to vote the way you're going to vote, and if I didn't pitch you well enough on my vote, then so be it. But I also tended to leave feeling comfortable, because usually my mom would text, like, way to fight the good fight, or something like that, or else a community member would write and say, thanks for standing up for what I believe too. So I usually, if I'm heard, I think it's from either people who love me or the constituents that I'm up here doing the work for.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar perspective as Rachel. So that is where, I'm generally feeling heard. And I think what contributes to that is just you all giving me a chance to say my piece. I mean, I do often disagree on a lot of things, right? And but you still give me a chance to speak what's in my heart and my brain, and I appreciate that. So because I think it's those opportunities that then allow me to hear from other folks that I'm supported.
So I appreciate you indulging me. As someone who spends a lot of time with a lot of councils in a lot of places, don't make me say that on camera, man. Among the things that I have said any number of times, and I might have said it to you, which is a council that always votes 100% the same way is a dysfunctional council. Similarly, a council that can't disagree and then walk away and be civil is a dysfunctional council. Tara, I was struck by your comments about that there were sort of the similarity to a sales job, because I often say democracy is a marketplace of ideas. Like, that's what it is at its very core. And some ideas get sold and get caught and people run with them, and some don't. And some people are able to think of it that way and go, yep, had the meeting, fought the good fight, I lost, I went home, I'm over it, Tuesday night, stay Tuesday night. I'll ask you to reflect that not everybody is like that. And that the things, that the way that we treat people when they don't agree with us leaves a mark on a good number of souls. And so what I hear is, for some of you, this is a non-issue. And you might accidentally then also assume that your words don't land on other people. What I hear as things that matter to some members of this group is, it helps me when you give me time to say my piece. What I find in my own work is sometimes it also helps for someone to say, I hear what you're saying is this. You care deeply about this. You think these things are the right choices. I disagree with that. And that's okay, but at least someone knows, right? But you at least processed what I was saying because you were paying attention to me and not just making your mental grocery list, right? So sometimes that helps. So giving people time to say their piece and then reflecting back what you've heard. You don't have to agree with it to acknowledge that you heard it. And then a couple of you also said, it's nice when people ask me, is there a way we could get you on board? Is there an amendment? Or, hey, I heard that you disagree with this, but you had a really cool idea. We'd like to incorporate that. Again, it helps people know that you're listening. It helps them feel like you're not just counting the votes and shutting down the minority. So when we do stakeholder stuff that I have done for you all in your community in all kinds of places, we don't do voting. And we don't do voting because by its very nature, it is a win-lose proposition. And it creates very, very little incentive to give a rip about the people in the minority. But you're better than that, and you know you're better than that, right? And so what consensus does, which I'm not suggesting that you do because that's a different context, but what it does is it creates an incentive to bring other people on board. And that's what do you have an amendment that could help you get there? That's what that is. That's bringing people on board, having them join the party of the majority instead of just saying, suck it, we got the numbers, you lose. So really will encourage you to sort of hear that, even if it's not true for you and not a need that you personally have every day, good on you if you're one of those people that can, that water off the duck's back and get on with your day. But a lot of people aren't. And those people that aren't, they need your kindness and they need your respect and they need you to hear them, even if you don't agree with them. The job is not to agree because agree. The job is to hear because respect, and then go ahead and do your voting. That's my little Heather speech. Delighted to have anyone else reflect on anything before we move on, if you have anything to say.
That's all I have to say. I think
Great.
we do that.
I think that's fantastic. And if you do it, then thank you for indulging me and letting me waste 30 minutes of your evening. Carry it with you a little bit out into the world. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Tara, I agree that often happens, and I think we generally work together really well and hear each other and listen to each other, but I would invite my colleagues as the person who's facilitating the meetings. If you ever feel like that hasn't been happening, or you do feel like, wow, I really wasn't listened to tonight in a way that was hurtful to me, please let me know. Like, give me a call the next day and give some feedback, and because we do want to achieve these, just what you're saying about Heather. So to the extent that we don't, I think it'd be good to hear about it so we can do better.
Thanks, Erin. And maybe not so much with the personal, like the diminishing a thing a person said. I did hear that in your comments as well, that sometimes when passions run high, our words get away from us a little bit. If you hear yourself do it, people make mistakes. I'm so sorry, Erin. That was personal. I didn't mean for that to be personal. Thanks. All right. Last night, I don't know if you remember this, but there was this very jovial group of directors, and they had many, many fine things to tell you. And you had some questions, but there was also many hours of that. Wondering if anyone has any additional thoughts, considerations, or just general reflections on last night's conversation that you want to share with your colleagues or with staff before we move on to the work of this evening. Yeah, Bob?
Well, I don't know whose idea that was last night, but I have to say it was one of the best things I've ever seen. This is my 8th retreat, and Nuri, I don't know if it was your idea or the retreat committee, but whoever's idea it was a fantastic idea. Because what it exposed for us is how well you guys work together and how you're not siloed and how you're coordinated and how you have pretty good senses of humor. I think it was. I went into last night thinking, oh, this is just a space filler. Everyone's going to tell us what they do. I run parks, I run transportation, but. Not to single anyone out specifically. Yeah, or whatever it was somebody would say. I didn't want to say all 19 of them. But it was way better than that. I went home going like, wow, damn, that was really, really good. Yeah, especially parks. I actually learned a lot from you all, as I always do. And so I would just suggest whoever plans the next retreat, do this again. This was really, really, really valuable. So thank you, retreat committee. Thank you, Nuria, for putting this together, because I thought that was a really fantastic experience last night. One of my best on council.
I will give all credit to Nuria, who had done this exercise with her directors maybe a week or two before we were having a retreat committee meeting. We were talking about the kinds of things that, we might talk about at the retreat. Nuria mentioned it, and obviously it was brilliant. So kudos to Nuria, and thank you for bringing that idea, and thank you to all the directors for sticking with us last night and giving us the overviews. I just want to say I already implemented some of the stuff that I learned last night, because there was that was a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. But just this afternoon, somebody sent me an email from the community, and they were asking, hey, did we get any Broncos money like Longmont did? And has that already been decided what to do? And you know what? I had an answer right there, because we had just heard about that last night. And so even for that, for being able to say, hey, yeah, I can give you a really general overview, and here's the department to go to if you have any more specific questions, that right there was really helpful. So it was just so neat to see that last night, 12 hours later, and I was already putting it to use. So thank you.
I just want to thank the directors, right? When we embarked on this, and I said last year I want to do a collective work plan, there was some rumbling, I'll say, right? Good-natured rumbling, and a little bit about the why. Like, why do we need that? Everybody has their work plan, and to be honest, I'm always cautious about it because we don't want to add more work. But what you heard last night were 95, well, I'm going to say like 98 because Kurt snuck a few in there on me. But 95 written and 98 Kurt extra work plan items out of a work plan that doesn't include all of the work, but is over 800 work plan items long. And it's the work that these folks do day in and day out that really, at least my intent was to lift that up and to share some of that with you all. And so I just so appreciate it that it resonated. And in fact, it will actually color a little bit of our next item, which is about the study sessions, but just wanted to really appreciate pretty publicly our leadership team who just does extraordinary work.
All right, if there's nothing else from council, speaking of study sessions, we should talk about study sessions. I was just going to kick it over to Nuria anyway. So Nuria, our agenda from last night says staff presentation on the current role and scope of study sessions. Is you the staff?
I am the staff.
Sweet.
And really, it's just a pretty quick update on it. There was, as you heard yesterday, there's a desire for you all to hear more from us, not just what's on the agenda, but how do we dive deeper in it? I know it's a conversation I had with Lauren months and months ago when she had the opportunity to listen to climate initiatives do something, and she was like, why don't we hear more about that, right? So I just appreciate Lauren bringing that up, and as the subcommittee came together, we were thinking about what that role is, and so my job really is to just sort of put that reminder out there and then open that up, and certainly Nicole and Lauren, if you want to ask your colleagues what else or take it from there. But for us, study sessions really are critical, and I'll say that sometimes we need clear direction before we go write ordinances to know if there's something in action that's going to come before you. We need to know that ahead of time so that we know what direction to go in before staff is kind of spinning their wheels and trying to guess what you'd like. So we use study sessions in that way. We have used study sessions in other areas to really talk about topics of interest. We're about to have some of those now, and I think there's an interest and a desire to have more of those ad hoc sessions. April 13th, we're going to spend an entire 3 hours talking about homelessness with our partners in the county. April 27th, you have asked to talk about what are the impacts on meth in our community. We have our partners at Boulder County Public Health joining us, and really a talk about what impacts do we see as staff, and I appreciate Rachel who brought that forward, and so we'll be doing that. We are happy to continue to bring more of those conversations to you, and so we have listed out on the second page, you'll see in your current term, this is a list of all the study sessions that we've already done with you. It's a lot, right? And we have about 16 of those left in the remaining of the term, unless we convert more of those into other meetings. And I think the desire of the subcommittee, and I'll perhaps turn it over to you all, is to see what other topics would you like us to take deeper dives on, because we can try to plan those as we move forward, while also bringing forward those items that we're going to need to hear more direction from you on as we move on, as we need to do some work. That was my 2-second presentation.
This is very, very good. Quick question. In our original agenda, there was a series of bullets that said existing emerging issues include. Were those intended to be study session topics? Ballot measures, economic security, childcare. Do we know where that list came from?
I believe some of those were ideas that were coming about what gaps, what haven't we heard, what would we would like to take deeper dives on. The ballot issue item is a separate item. I believe that's an update that is intended to happen after we finish this.
Okay.
But the others could be some of those emerging issues that we want to take deeper dives on. But we defer to council if there are things, because we can certainly move in whatever direction you'd like for study sessions.
And Nuri, do you have any suggestions for council on the overall number? Like roughly there are 16 study sessions left in the year, and some of them you've already programmed them, so if they have new additional ideas, that would be a trade-off with some of these additional lists, or is it, again, maybe no adjectives and adverbs and you could get 2 topics in a given night?
I mean, I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule yet. We have been thinking maybe there's an ad hoc one the way we've been doing once a quarter, that we can take a study session and go into a deeper dive. But we never know when these issues are going to emerge, right? So we want to be flexible. But as you all have seen from the council meetings that we've had and the study sessions we've had so far, we are mostly chock full of things that we need you all to give us direction on. We need some of that support, and we need your insight as we move forward. So I can't imagine that we would be in a situation unless you all wanted to start calling extra study session days that are separate and apart from what we already have, that we can dispense with all the planned study sessions. There's a lot of work coming your way with a lot of ordinance changes that we're going to need to take some of that time for, because we don't tend to have that time in regular meetings. But, you know, whether it's, let's make sure that we've got, depends on what topics you want to do too. What do you want to bring forward? Can we create that avenue? And frankly, if it's important enough, we can do a second day. I know staff may kill me, but we can do an additional day at some point and do a study session if it's that important. So it really does depend on the topics. But know that I would say easily 3/4 of our study sessions moving forward will need to be on stuff that needs to come for you that we need direction on.
Council, questions, comments, ideas?
Well, a threshold question here. I may be not feeling heard at this moment, because I had asked that we bump up to the front of the conversation the homelessness discussion, and I'm not super interested in talking about study sessions, so I just want to know if we're going to have a sort of a council vote on what we want to talk about tonight and what the agenda is. And I had asked that maybe we do that last night, but I think it's important that we at least that there's a majority of support for what the agenda is tonight. And if we are going to talk about study sessions, kind of understanding what input we would be expected to give.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So the rough agenda that I had is that we would talk through study sessions, hear your ideas for future study sessions. I don't envision that needs to be particularly long.
I didn't understand this item to be, what do we want to have on the list of future study sessions? Because I'm wholly unprepared for that.
Sure.
I thought discussion was, should we have study sessions, or what form should study sessions be? Mm-hmm. Not like, what do we want?
Okay.
Because I don't know that any of us were prepared to talk about that tonight.
Retreat committee?
Yeah, the intention was sort of after hearing sort of everything that's being worked on. Okay, sorry, let me back up. We don't have a lot of capacity at the staff level to add things to our work plan. But, you know, there are other things as a council that we can do. We're dealing with a lot of really complicated issues in our community, and study sessions to me feel like a powerful way to take a deeper dive into a topic, even if that might not mean finding a solution in this term or having a, you know, something that we're bringing forward right away. It's bringing attention to something that's important to our community, and it also is helping start the path towards solutions. So I think it's more, I pictured this to be a check-in to say, beyond what you hear happening with, you know, in existing work plans, are there any other things that we either should be paying special attention to that aren't going to come forward as part of our work plan, or that you've heard that staff is already working on that we would be interested in hearing more about? Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that needs to be a super in-depth conversation, and we always have the opportunity to bring forward emerging topics as study session items, but just taking the time right now to see if there are anything, if people have ideas for things that are pressing.
Lovely clarification. Nicole, I'll give you a chance to jump in and then hear from Aaron and Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm confused by some of the confusion a little bit as well, because I don't, you know, I think in some of the one-on-one conversations and things, I felt like we got to a place where folks were understanding that this wasn't about, are we having study sessions or not? But, you know, I think as we mentioned, you know, one of the intentions was to try to understand what are these bigger topics that we need to talk about. And I thought that's what folks were sending as well. Things like family homelessness, economic insecurity, those kinds of things. And just to kind of give some guidance of like a list of of what are the topics that we might want to dive into a little bit more, and then as we have more time, as we move through the year. So no, it wasn't really intended to be are we having study sessions or not? Because I think that's
You should do that,
necessary.
yeah. Mhm. And I will tell you
yeah.
that a couple people, when I talked to them one-on-one about their ideas, I said, so that's a future study session. Someone's like, oh, no, I don't want that to be a future study session. I literally want to talk about that at the retreat. So I made a separate list, which was, again, the homelessness and the PDNS stuff, at the mobility, Hill mobility, and the charter and the absent mayor situation. So I see how it got messy. Yeah. Aaron, and then Matt, and then Tara, and then we should decide what we're going to do and then do it.
Yep. And so appreciate the clarification from both of you. And I just want to say that when we talked it all through last night, I felt like all of the current topics that need to be addressed are already on our agenda. And so that gave me that reassurance that we are addressing the emerging topics that have come up and are already planning on talking about them. So I just want to say, I hear you, and I'm comfortable with where we are right now, with the caveat of we've got a few specific topics to talk about tonight that I want to explore. But other than that, I could leave this item, be done with it right now.
Glorious. Thank you, Aaron. Matt?
I agree with Aaron on this. I will say we're kind of encroaching on maybe the debrief on the back end, because we're debating on whether or not we should do an agenda item that was received a week ago, and it doesn't seem like there was the check-in from this whole body to determine whether or not that's something we all wanted on the agenda to begin with. So I think we're kind of,
Bouncing around a bit,
reverse engineering things at this point. I'd like to just move on. I think what we got here is fantastic, and I trust staff to bring what they need in order to keep the work that we've said going. And I think we just forge ahead with what we got. I would only add, if we need to, we have business to do too, so I wouldn't really want to add. In fact, I'd say we have more business and perhaps study to do in some capacities, at least what the community tells us. So I think, if there's a need to think about special days like Tuesdays to take some relief, then I'm all ears, but I think we could move on.
Mm-hmm. Tara?
I guess the reason why I was confused, I thought last night was excellent, but we heard from everybody almost that there's not staffing for what we even want, never mind adding emerging issues. If I had my dream, as usual, I would say lighting in the tunnels for the 14th time. But do I feel like I want to give Natalie one more thing to do? No. You're welcome. So that's why I don't think we should really go there. We have a full schedule, and I think that I don't want to aggravate one more staff person with any of my ideas today.
From a place of kindness, lovely. Thank you. Okay, so a couple of you saying you don't need to talk about it because all the things are coming. And one of you saying all the things aren't coming, but we don't need to add any more things. Lauren and Nicole, since you teed this up, are you feeling there are additional things that you want to propose that we should spend some time talking on? Just yes or no is mostly what I'm looking for right now.
No.
Okay. Lauren, additional topics that you want to bring for study session consideration tonight?
I still have the one that Nuria brought up, which is that I would love to hear more check-ins around the work that we're doing in sustainability, and it doesn't need to be huge or big, but I do think that those are really important to our community and would like to uplift them more.
All right, Bob?
Well, I'm kind of agreeing with Aaron and Matt. I think we can let this rest, and we got like 8 years worth of work ahead of us. So I don't think adding anything more. I do also want to remind ourselves that council members always have the opportunity, whether it's a study session or a legislative matter, to make a request of CAC to add something. CAC may not do it, staff may push back, and that's all fine. But we always have an avenue to say, hey, listen, I'd love to have a study session area sometime in the next 3 months on fill in the blank. And I think that CAC historically has been very, and staff has been very responsive to those types of requests. So I just want to remind us that tonight's not the last time that we're going to talk about 2023. Anybody on any day can say, CAC, please add something.
Great, thanks, Bob. Rachel, other than the things that you mentioned, to me, those are the things, right? Cool. In that case, Nuria, you have the check-ins on sustainability work on your radar?
I do, and if any other item comes up and we can do something like we're doing with the county on meth and with homelessness, we are happy to bring that forward. Let us know, because I know that there are topics that either you know now that you want to go deeper to, or who knows what happens that community is asking us to go deeper on as well. So we will try to be as flexible as possible, and we'll try not to push back on topic, but perhaps on timing, depending on who's involved.
Great. Y'all cool with that? Okay. Coming back to Rachel's original question, which was just can we get a notified on the agenda, I would propose the following agenda then. It is 6:20. I feel like we should be able to get to absent mayorism, charter committee check-ins, and mobility, and what do you want to do with the PDNS ordinance direction that you're not going to give during a study session, that we should be able to crank all that out by pretty close to 7 and then rest the night on homelessness. Does that seem doable?
I'm just one of, 7 here tonight, but yes, good, sounds good to me.
Works for you? I'm seeing nodding. Fantastic. Let's do that then. Hot dog. Let's get after it. Fantastic. So, Aaron, as I understand it, sometimes the mayor and the mayor pro tem are together, are both not in a meeting, and that creates a situation.
Yeah, so we don't have any provisions for it. And as travel is coming back post-COVID and Mark is experiencing some health issues, this has come up several times. And we don't have anything in our rules and procedures about that, and I think we should add something to our rules and procedures about it. So I'd like, if we could just have an item under matters where we could talk through the best approach and then get some change to our rules and procedures, I think that would help us.
Do you know what you would like to propose as a rule and procedure?
Well, I don't want to get the big conversation tonight, but what I would say is if it's an entire evening that perhaps the most recent mayor pro tem in order as their recency could take over the meeting, facilitating the meeting. And if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, that the person sitting next to the mayor or the mayor pro tem could take over for those minutes.
Okay. I see people nodding along as those seem like reasonable things to consider. The procedure then for a under matters conversation is city attorney's office would draft something in advance for you to consider just based on those ideas, or you want to talk more about it prior to anything being drafted?
I mean, if people are just fine with those ideas, maybe we could move forward, but I don't want to push people.
Anyone have any other cool ideas you want to kick into the kitty? They like your ideas. Cool.
I was just going to comment too, and maybe Sandra correct me if I'm wrong, that because we are at this kind of meeting, we're not necessarily taking an action, but we can have that direction, and we will reflect that in the summary of this meeting as well. So we will memorialize it in a document.
Great. Yeah, obviously a formal decision would come later.
If
I
you're
would
wondering-
just add, I'm sorry, maybe if you have to go a step beyond that, like the backup to the backup to the backup. I don't know how far we're going,
At some
but
point, shouldn't you just
maybe-
not have a meeting?
yeah, that's true. So another person that maybe would make sense or to consider would be the third person that's on CAC that week.
So maybe some options. So I don't know if you all have noticed that Samuel, who works for me, is sitting up here literally typing everything that you say. So all the ideas will be captured and become a formal record. Right, I know, right? I tried to do that job for someone else lately. I'm like, oh, right, I've lost my ability to type 90 million words a minute. I got old and soft. All right.
Sandra's got something.
Yep, Sandra.
I did want to just follow up and say that I did look it up in the rules. It does require action, a vote by council for the notified. So I did want to clarify that. And then in addition to that, I'm happy to write whatever rules of procedure you've recommended and then bring it forward at a meeting.
Yep, Bob.
As good as Aaron's idea was, I also like Rachel's, and we also have 2 council members who are not here tonight. So I wonder if when you write it up, maybe you could write it as alternatives, and then we can talk about it at whatever meeting you bring it forward to it.
Lauren?
I think we would also be open to other brilliant ideas that the legal team brings forward for how we might do that if there are other suggestions.
So some alternatives for discussion and then options for council members who aren't here to add into the kitty. Maybe Junior Mark right now is sitting on the genius idea. We don't know. Okay. Sandra, you cool? Nuri, you cool? Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for raising that. Charter committee members, you wanted to visit a little bit with council tonight. Do you want to tee up your question and then we'll discuss?
Sure. You good?
Maybe I'll just kind of outline the process because I've done this a few times. So historically, the Charter Committee is two members of council, right? So this year is Matt and me. And historically, the Charter Committee meets with the City Attorney's Office and the Clerk's Office, usually about once a month, January, February, March, April. And typically by May, the Charter Committee brings forward a package of ideas, and hopefully that's a good package of ideas because we only have a narrow window of time in which to actually put things on the ballot based this summer. And so Matt and I thought that maybe we've already had one meeting. We have a couple more scheduled here coming up. Matt and I thought we would tell you what we've talked about already, but more importantly, ask council what you'd like us to be working on in the next 2 or 3 months so that we don't show up in May and have the wrong things.
Cool. Great.
Thank you, Bob. It's funny, some years are heavy on the ballot, other years can be lighter. Some we have control over, and other years we don't, because our residents decide they are going to go full democracy on us. The main one that we are working on is fair pay for council. And this isn't a new idea, because this was something that if you remember at our last retreat, fell just off the top 10 in terms of resurrecting the Blue Ribbon Commission, and it was sort of left there with an asterisk of if and when there's capacity, we can maybe give it some legs here in 2023. So here we are at 2023, and I think really the question is council comfortable with us continuing to move forward? There seems to be capacity to handle lifting up a Blue Ribbon Commission in which to let some residents, people that may be previous council members or others in the community, to give us some feedback and give us some clarity as to what fair pay for council would look like. The one data point we have is the Fort Collins measure that just passed pretty handily that did it. And so we sort of have started with modeling after that in framing things, but just wanted to check in if that's a worthy pursuit to kind of lift up a Blue Ribbon Commission, get that recommendation from which to frame something for the ballot, and then, come back to you all in the May timeframe with something on fair pay. So just wanted to check in if we're headed in a good direction or we should hit the e-brake and go a different way.
Nicole, go ahead.
Yeah, I really like the idea of starting to look into this. I think this was one of the things I brought up last year as critical, right, to getting a more representative and inclusive council. I think I have a couple of concerns about trying to get something done by May and having something on this year's ballot. First of all, one of the reasons that we did the even year election ballot measure last year and put that on is because we know that the folks who show up in odd years to vote are different from the people who show up in even years. And I think especially around this issue, the folks who have pay as a barrier to serving on council, they are likely to be those who might be more likely to weigh in on that in an even year rather than an odd year. So I think just to make sure that the folks who would benefit from this the most are weighing in, I would like to see it there. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, is that I think it might actually take or be worth kind of a deeper engagement to try to understand what equitable and fair pay looks like for council. So for example, maybe there's a single working mom who would love to serve on council, but needs full-time pay in order to make that a reality, versus, somebody who maybe is retired, doesn't, is able to do council for a 20-hour week kind of salary. So I think there's some issues there. I think the other thing is, especially as we're thinking about trying to recruit and bring in folks who have more marginalized identities, it takes more work to get to the same place. For example, for somebody who is BIPOC, especially somebody who's Black or Indigenous. And I think I would love to just dive into a discussion of how do we try to accommodate for that as well. And I don't think that's something that can be done in a couple of months to get something on the ballot measure for May. So I think there's all kinds of juicy, to use your word, Heather, conversations that we could have on this topic and really try to get it to a good place for 2024 so that we can create more equity in who can serve on council and the pay that they get. So, but I love this idea and thinking about how we can do this, because it really is a barrier for a lot of folks.
Yeah, Nicole, thanks so much for raising that, because Matt and I have actually talked about those very points. So that's very much on our mind. Number one, it is a lot of work, so I'm not sure that we can get it done this year. And secondly, we are sensitive to the fact that this ballot measure, whatever it might look like, might have a greater chance of success in 2024. So we are all over that. I guess we just wanted your permission to start working on it. We may come to you in May and saying like, okay, we're about a quarter of the way done. It ain't happening this year. Or we may come to you and say, we've done a lot of work and we feel pretty well, but we think from a political standpoint, we'd be better in 2024. So we just wanted to make sure you guys were okay working on it. I was with you, Nicole, last year's retreat, and I wanted us to start working on this in 2022, but I think we didn't have enough votes. And the one thing I'm a little bit nervous about is this is exactly what happened last council. So Aaron will remember that, and Rachel, that this council, the last council talked about in 2021, handed it off to this council, and we kind of didn't pursue it, and we're a year down the road, and so I'm a little bit worried that we start pursuing it, and then there's another group of people that's going to sit here a year from now, and so I just want to make sure that we just move it as far as we can. This council will make a informed decision this summer about whether we want to put it on 2024 or 2023.
Can I just add that the whole goal is to just get a recommendation, regardless of how long it takes, get a recommendation in our pocket, and then we can decide what the best political opportunity is to do it. So your points are well taken. So we just want to know if we can move forward with that or not. So that's our main question for council.
Nuria, food for thought?
Yeah, and mine is more in the mama bear mode right now, and just want to know a little bit more, and we can take this offline, what your interest is in terms of what you need from staff. There are some things, for example, and I know Lauren has been working a lot on minimum wage, for example, and has not required a whole lot of staff lift, and we've been able to support that work as we move forward. Standing up a commission, if the expectation is for staff to do it, as they're also doing ranked choice voting this year, is going to be difficult. So I don't know what that looks like and don't want to assume, so happy to have those conversations, but that's my only concern about timing.
That's I was just responding. I think that's a point well taken. We've sort of addressed that and had those conversations with staff, and I think I think as we've sort of defined it, there's a few levels of support and work needed. Right? I mean, kind of like many things, we could literally just carbon copy what Fort Collins did because it was successful and rubber stamp, say go play, and require nothing. We can do some engagement, or we can spend a 9 or 10 month process. So I think we just have to decide what that is, and we'll get there as we define that. But thanks for bringing that up.
So what I just might suggest, Nicole, those were excellent points, and I appreciate you all looking into this, is maybe get started. Start looking into it, see if there's a very light lift staff version to start gathering information and ideas. This may not be the year to put it on the ballot, but I think a strong majority of us is interested in seeing what it might look like. So maybe we could give you the green light to get started without pre-committing to an outcome in terms of timing.
Lauren?
I just wanted to make a request as you look at it. I don't know which community it is nearby, but there is also a community that has more official staff support, like stronger, the council member. Because to me, the amount of work is tied, right? It's not just pay, but there's also like how much we can accomplish. And so I think that both support and pay are kind of tied, and there might be two different ways of looking at that, or a balance or a choice.
Can you clarify support?
You mean like everyone gets their own tailor?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Okay.
That is exactly what I mean.
Damn it.
I get the OG.
Yeah, Denver has a full-time aide for each council member.
Yep. So just so I'm understanding, this idea of a blue ribbon commission would come later after the two of you continue to do some consideration exploring, because that to me sounds like that's where the staff lift comes in particular, is if there's a group of humans from the community working with you.
Yeah, but I think this is kind of bang bang in the sense of I think we may only need one or so, maybe a second meeting to define where we want to go, and then when staff's ready, we just press play. So I don't think we want to draw this out any longer, because we know we're running up against. Because if there's a need to want to do it, we want to have it a runway so we can get it done by 2023. If we do, we want to work from the shortest timetable and know that works. But if we extend, great. But if that's a deadline, then we want to start as soon as possible so we have our runway.
Anyone else have thoughts on this? Is there any member of council in the room today who is troubled and would like to discourage Bob and Matt from continuing this conversation? See how I did that? How they didn't vote? See how I did that? You're welcome. Yeah. Okay, cool. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, not troubled or wanting to discourage or anything, just really wanting to make sure that we're hearing a lot from the folks who would benefit the most and from whom we hear that the lack of pay is an obstacle to their running for and serving on council. So that's where, I think staff has a wonderful process for really engaging folks in the community and through some trusted relationships and things. So, but yeah, love to hear what you all start thinking about.
So Matt and Aaron, what can council and staff expect from you next in terms of checking in with them? Sorry, Matt and Bob, you guys, men people. Council members saying, make sure you're checking in with the community. They would like to probably hear back from you. Staff saying they want for you to check in before you get too far out of the gate. What's your vision for closing the loop with these folks?
Well, I think as I referenced before, we need to once we get through the other pieces here and we have a sense of what direction we have from council, not just on this issue, but of anything else that they want to add to the plate, then we can scope out the amount of work or amount of meetings we have. So I think it's probably a little premature to sort of plant a flag on that.
Understood.
It's heard and we're going to work on that, but we need to first get a sense of what the total scope of our committee's work is going to be after tonight.
Got it.
Thank you.
Is that what you were going to say, Bob?
Yeah, we have two other things that we're thinking about, so we're gonna
Wait,
put
there's
those in-
more.
There's more, well, and hopefully there is even, maybe even more from council, we're leading up to a question.
Got it.
So we're gonna start talking here in a second, ask the question. The two other things that we're working on, as you heard from Cara and some others, last night, this is not technically a charter thing, but we kind of taking elections on as our responsibility as well, and that's the 0.15 sales tax, which expires in 2024, and I think the preference of staff is to try to renew it in 2023. So we're going to be supportive of staff on that unless people think that's not a good use of our time. And then, Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about the idea on the cannabis tax?
Yes. So in a lot of the work that Kurt and his team are doing, and certainly the stresses on our communities, we're going to be talking about meth and stuff coming up. One of the things that was sort of came out of this was thinking about a cannabis tax to specifically support enhancements and growth in our efforts to support mental health and drug addiction in our community and to complement the resources that already exist out there and to sort of leverage what we can do to sort of add to that since it is such a main stressor in our community and relying totally on outside resources may create some futility in us meeting our total objectives. So we've talked with Kurt and his team and getting some evaluation, and so that's just it's early in the hopper, but just want to throw out that idea to make sure if that's something that's of interest, because we can, again, hit the e-brake, or we can continue to pursue it, gain more context and information, and then bring back something that's a little bit more cooked, but just want to check in now before we pump too much into it in exploration. So this is sort of that check-in, take the exit, or go on the runway.
Go ahead, Nicole. And then Rachel. And then Terry.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting idea, and I would appreciate hearing a little bit more. The other thing that I just think about is why just cannabis and not, say, alcohol as well or something like that, right? So I think just something else to kind of look into, just different kinds of substances, and yeah.
Rachel?
I love it. And I want to know, did you invent the e-brake? Put your foot on the e-brake. Is that you tonight? I've never heard that.
Yeah, I think that's my line for the night, but I didn't invent it. So
The action.
there's no original one-liners in this world anymore. You're imitating everyone else. So whoever out there had that imitation is flattery. So there you
But
go.
if we don't know that person, we're just going to think it was you and think you were real cool.
I don't know, but David Bell yesterday saying that HR does not do whimsy, to me, was the one-liner.
Tara?
Well, want to make sure I'm holding just the base. It's a lot of pressure here tonight.
Not the
I
gooseneck.
just want to check in with Ally about the about the dedicated tax for the aging buildings we discussed yesterday. And I know this is totally off the topic, but it has to do with dedicated sales tax.
Can we close off
Yes,
the
before we- yeah.
conversation?
Yeah,
on
unless
the
we want
cannabis?
to add it onto the
Then-
cannabis.
Because then Bob and I want to ask
Oh,
what
she-
other ideas there
She's
are.
asking if you want to add it onto the cannabis, though.
No? Okay.
I hadn't even thought of that. Okay, so I thought you were talking about a different topic, so you're trying to stay on.
Yeah.
cannabis.
Well,
Okay,
I
there
am
you go.
kind of, but not. You know how I am.
Gray area. It's a gray
Yeah,
area.
it's great.
yeah.
I'm not really sure where I'm going, but I do not want to forget about
We'll see when you get there. We'll
this
let you know.
request of Ally and where it can go, whether on this particular cannabis or alcohol tax or some other dedicated sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not this year.
Allie, have you thought all about these things?
Allie Rhodes, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Wait, what?
I think about funding our parks and recreation all day, every day. I will point out that the North and South Boulder Recreation Centers were built in 1973, bonding off of a cigarette excise tax. And so,
I was also built in 1973, but I don't think cigarettes were involved.
so what I would recommend and where I believe council is going, Aaron, Mr. Mayor, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. Where I believe council is going is while you are talking about ballot initiatives, do you want to consider how to fund aging infrastructure? I would encourage that conversation. And again, my colleague Joanna Crayon, who's not here tonight, is going to be talking. She has some wicked smart people on her team who are doing really great work about how you build a capital stack to take care of really expensive things like our recreation centers. And so I think that conversation is coming. There's a study session scheduled April something. I don't know the date. We're just here all the time on Thursdays, right? So it's that conversation is coming, and I would encourage you to consider how your work can contribute to funding.
Aaron?
Yeah, no, I think this idea has a huge amount of promise, and I guess just my hesitation would be like there's a universe of potential taxes, and so Nicole's point about potentially alcohol as well, that makes sense to me. We did a cigarette excise tax. That sounds interesting, So I guess rather than just say, oh, we're going to do this tax on marijuana to fund this thing, I'd really like some analysis on our options. And hear from the finance people, hear from Kurt in Housing and Human Services, because obviously mental health is an enormous need, and I would love to have additional funds devoted to it. But I would like to kind of think about the universe of options before committing to one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Lauren has some thoughts?
Yeah, I want to agree with that. I think there are a lot of different things that we could tax, and so understanding, the legal ramifications, what we can and how much and why, but also sort of the equity, who's affected by those taxes. Sin taxes tend to pass, but they tend to have disproportionate effects. So just really trying to understand who would benefit and who the money's coming from and all of those kinds of things for looking at it a couple different ways.
Mm-hmm. Matt, go ahead.
It's probably just helpful context. I mean, the city brings in its total cannabis tax only $3 million a year. So that's the full complement of roughly, I think it's a little over 8% that we do. So just to give you context of the aggregation of money. So when thinking about can cannabis fund the needs of infrastructure of the parks, likely not, because we're only talking about a fraction of $3 million. So not that it wouldn't help, but we're talking many, many zeros. So to just give you a sense, but Kara's team only did that analysis on the cannabis, but it'd be great to get their thoughts on alcohol as well and just see what kind of aggregation we're looking at. So those are good points. Happy to look into those.
So this particular item, before we move on to additional ideas, does sound like, Nuria, there might be some staff bandwidth impacts here. Did you have thoughts?
Well, I think right now we're still in that world of imagination and wondering, and I think these are all good ideas, and I think that's what Councilmember Weiner was trying to get to as well. Like, are there other uses for if there is going to be a tax? And so I think it's great. I think finance staff can certainly, I believe they have the capacity to support as you're thinking about that. And I just got a note from Junie that she's on her way, so she's very excited. She's been listening to some of these brilliant ideas and is hopefully arriving soon.
Yay. So it sounds like, council double checking, you're comfortable with the charter committee carrying on with full pay for council, 0.15 sales tax, and cannabis tax to support sort of mental health and sort of associated ideas. Stop me if you feel differently. Okay, now you have a question.
Do you have any ideas for us on things that we should look at with regards to the charter and or elections or other interesting things that you want to throw Bob and I to chase?
Y'all have any other cool ideas? Aaron?
Well, I just got a text from Junie that she has some ideas, but she's going to be here soon.
Texting and driving. Junie.
So I think she'll be here very soon. So we can maybe come back to it after.
Okay,
from
so
Junie.
we'll pause. Okay.
Can I put like
Yeah? Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to kind of plus one the whole mental health and trying to find more funding for that. It's definitely a huge need. It is a growing need, especially for youth. So all in for trying to find some ways to fund some city services there.
Bob?
I just want to, great feedback, really appreciate it. It's a really, really big task for both staff and for Matt and me if we think about all the things we could tax on one column and all the things we could spend that tax on the other column. So that's where we kind of came in with a pretty narrow proposal about cannabis and mental health. We can expand that. We can talk about alcohol. We can talk about shoes. We can talk about all the other things we can tax.
Shoes is a bridge too far.
Not shoes, not shoes, not shoes.
Not
And we talk
okay.
about all the needs we have because, as Ally and others have indicated, we've got infinite number of needs. So we're happy to work on anything, but if we want to get something together in a package for us to consider this summer, we're going to have to probably be relatively narrow on our focus because there's an infinite number of things to tax and an infinite number we could spend money on. So I just want to set lower expectations a little bit.
And is it fair to say, Bob, that you and Matt have heard the ideas and the perspectives on council? You'll continue to work on it and bring them back your best ideas?
Yeah, and we'll continue to talk. This is not a one-off thing. We meet every month, so we'll continue to talk to each one of you one-on-one. And if you've got other ideas, I mean, a few years ago, some of you remember that Matt Applebaum wanted to do a head tax. He wanted to do a head tax, and we kept saying, "Well, what do you want to spend the money on?" It doesn't matter. I just want to do a head tax. Well, okay. So that's why I didn't go anywhere.
Matt, go ahead.
I would just more sort of try to kick back to, are there any other ideas of things that we should look on that aren't even really tax related? Are there changes to the charter, changes to our elections? I mean, just free-for-all chance for us to take that so that we can build our body of work in our subsequent meetings.
Nicole's got an idea, and then Tara.
I was just going to say, maybe go back and look at our work plan discussion last year, because I think head tax was there. I think Junie had proposed a tax to support homelessness services. So I think there's other stuff there that maybe could be fodder for thinking.
So I just wanted to be clear, we're not a tax committee. It's not to say we don't look at that. No, but I mean, the cannabis thing only came out because that was just some idea that I had cooked up with a few other folks, and we just had brought it up. We can look at other taxes, but I think the bigger tax stuff should be a much larger body conversation, not through, again, charter and elections. So I don't want to punt. I just want to honor that those larger discussions should be a larger body conversation. And so I think, yes, we should look at those, but I don't feel comfortable that in charter elections, we're a gatekeeper to those larger tax conversations.
Yes, definitely. But I think some of those specifically mentioned ballot measures to do things last year. So that was why.
Yeah, okay.
Tara, you have a juicy idea?
No.
Okay.
But I want to make it known that I totally support the mental health idea with the cannabis, and I just don't want people to forget about our rec centers. That's all I was really saying. Thank you.
Sounds like a thing is coming, though. Big thinking about how to fund capital projects is coming. So you'll have a minute or a couple hours to visit about that in the future.
And just noting again, I'd received the same message that Junie has some thoughts to share, so we'll come back to that.
I put Junie thoughts on my agenda, so we'll be sure we get to it. Junie thoughts. Anyone else have present thoughts? Charter things, ballot things? All right. So until we hear from Junie, carry on, and then we'll circle back. Okay, awesome, thanks. All right, want to talk a little bit about Hill Mobility Solutions. Bob, this was something that you... Perfectly timing. Hey. Yep. Bob, Hill Mobility Solutions, can you just frame it up for us, and what are you hoping council could discuss today?
Yeah, this is something I think is already underway, and Natalie can help a little bit here, and Chris as well. I mean, and a whole bunch of other people, and Doug. I think we've talked for the last couple of years about the fact that there's a conference center being built up at Grandview and 13th Street, and there will be, hopefully, if that works well, and of course we're kind of a co-developer of that. We encourage them to build that there. And we want to make sure that folks that are on the Hill, after they're done with their little conference or whatever, come downtown and spend money. We also want to make sure that the couple of million people who come downtown every year actually go up to the Hill, because we're trying to, one of the reasons why we're encouraging this is so that we revitalize the Hill and that the Hill becomes a better and more financially viable place. And so it's a two-way thing. The question is, how do we get people up and down the Hill? I mean, we all live here, so we know it's not that hard, but visitors oftentimes get a little bit of anxiety about how to get them on the Hill. We have Arboretum, that is not a fun place to walk through right now. Broadway's not a fun place to walk along, and it's just kind of a steep hill, so out-of-towners just get out of breath. And so for all for all the Flatlanders, for all those reasons, I think we want to continue, and this is not a decision we have to make tonight, but I just wanted to put on the table that I hope that we continue to talk about. And I know that Natalie and her team are working very hard on very short-term mobility discussions around 13th and Grandview and how do we make sure that's safe, medium-term solutions about how we make ped and bike connections, and then maybe longer-term solutions. And so nothing really to talk about tonight other than to make sure that we continue to have that on our work plan, which I know, I'm pretty sure it is, but I don't know if Brad or Natalie want to comment on that.
So, do you want me to start? You can start.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Well, I would say we haven't really allocated it in the work plan yet. We're all talking to each other about it. And I mean, and that's not to say that it possibly can't be added later in the year. We need to, from transportation's perspective, we need to look at just resources. And it really would be, I think, a pretty closely tied PNDS and transportation, because there would be, and I mean, really all four of our departments. So we can certainly look at it, and it's top of mind. We just haven't actually allocated resources to it yet. Do you have anything to add, Brad?
Yeah, so Brad Mueller, Planning and Development Services. I think you framed it, Councilmember Yates, exactly how we've been thinking of it, which are there are going to be some immediate needs that we've already worked through in terms of street approvals for the new hotel. There are some intermediate ones once it gets built that will be very operational and kind of simple capital. Think, improvements along Broadway. But the bigger vision is, I think we've recognized is more of a connectivity study than a mobility one, because it has land use implications if we're thinking of anything that's larger. So we've kind of started to frame it in those terms, and then to Natalie's point, that's then something that probably needs a takeoff ramp and a plan, and then going forward. So probably falling more into a traditional land use planning process. But it's on the radar, and it was part of that discussion yesterday about coordinating downtown initiatives.
Other council perspectives or thoughts on this one?
I know everything's an emergency, so I'm not saying that this one is. Oops. But I think the hotel's going to be ready in like 2 years, correct?
Right. So that gets to the point of there are already things that will be improved as part of the approval of the hotel, the part we could approve, which was just the streets and access. Then there'll be things that transportation's already thinking about in terms of e-bikes and stations, and I don't want to speak for you, but like bus routes and things like that, responding to the expectation of that. This longer thing of potential capital expenditure implications to Boulder High School land, to the Arboretum, those types of things that needs to be comprehensively thought through because of all the implications to other aspects. So it wouldn't be in place by the time the hotel, nor would it need to be from a capacity standpoint, I would submit. But it's how do we enhance beyond that and imagine its future in a way that's cool and meaningful and really further ties them together beyond just a functional way, but in a way that maybe is a feature, so to speak.
We'll talk offline.
Sounds good.
Anything else on this item? Bob, are you satisfied? Anything else on this item?
Yeah, I'm satisfied, and I realize this potentially moves into 24 and 25, and that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we had it on our radar. And I just want to observe, this is my 8th council retreat, and it's the first one that I haven't uttered the word gondola.
I was waiting for you to say the word gondola.
I got it in. I got it in.
Bob says gondola is totally on my bingo card, and now I think there's no Yahtzee now, man. Hi, Junie. Hello. So glad that you made it. It sounded like from the texting that perhaps you had some suggestions for the Charter and Election Committee.
Thank you so much. Interestingly, I was in the room, and I know Rachel mentioned, oh, well, I'm one of 7. And I was like, I'm here, I'm online. So I thought, okay, I might as well just come in to be part of this conversation because I couldn't participate online. And I think, I know I mentioned the comment that I was sitting on brilliant ideas because that's what you said. You said maybe Junie's
I
at
heard.
home
I heard they were
sitting on
awesome.
brilliant ideas. So I'm like, I said that, but ultimately,
I just assumed. She didn't tell me that. I just assumed.
yeah, that was just something I said. But I can make 2 comments just to please the 2 of you. My first comment was about the payment of council members. I thought I welcome that idea. You know, all of you know that I came to council as a student, and then I graduated. And I look at my experience, if council was a paid job, my experience probably would have been different because even on council, I was trying to make a living. So maybe if we do pay council members, we would have more diversity. So I welcome that, having that conversation with community, but I wouldn't want that to stop us because I know a lot of these conversations, it takes time, it takes staff timing as well. So maybe also doing an analysis of cost of living for here in Boulder, right? How much, what would it be like, how much would we have to pay someone to be able to live off being a council member? Because none of us can do that right now. And I don't know, I get paid so little, I don't even think about how much I make on council. I said 10,000, but I've heard it's more than 10,000. 12,000? See, I don't even count it because it's so little. It is a lot according to some community members. And another thing that I thought about, the question about who should take over as mayor, I like Rachel's idea about the third on CAC. I think that's a great idea. But also another thought that I had as well as part of that is maybe as well incorporate some of the new people who wants to do it, right? Because some people probably are thinking, I really want to do this job. Some people don't want to do it. But those who want to do it, give them the opportunity to learn the job and get some perspective. So opening it up to the group. So maybe, yes, so you punt it to the first person, to the third on CAC, and if they're not interested, punt it to the group so that everybody else can get the opportunity as well. And I heard some of the comments about the charter committee and the work that you're doing. I know I mentioned the homelessness tax, but ultimately we want to ensure community members are housed. So I'm not married to any of these ideas, and I know that my time on council is very limited as well, so thank you.
Thanks, Junie, and so glad that you made it. All right, anything else on that topic? Fantastic. All right, so I want to make sure we spend most of our remaining time on homelessness. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what it is you think you might possibly be saying about ordinances from PDNS. So what I think I heard last night, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, is you suggesting to staff, hey, while you're doing all those cool things that Brad told you about last night, if you see ways to improve things that would involve an ordinance change, we encourage you to bring them to us. Is that a fair summary?
I'm one person, and I won't speak for Rachel, who joined me on the Ask 'em hotline. I felt comfortable with that. I was actually really pleasantly surprised that, given all the work that we've thrown on Brad and his team's plate, that he feels that, yeah, while we're doing our work, we can start flagging those roadblocks, those handcuffs, and start to build maybe a package towards the end of the year that looks at what those things are. That's perfectly satisfactory to me.
Super.
But that's my perspective, and that kind of is opening the box that he says that staff have never really been asked that question before. So yes, if that's a chance to go, I'm good with that. So I feel comfortable.
Council members, are you comfortable with that? Nodding is good, thumbing is good. Thank you, fantastic. Brad, do you need any more information from council? Fantastic. Nori, are you cool?
I am cool, and if we're heading to homelessness now, unless folks have anything else, there's some folks here that are welcome to stay and perhaps also welcome to go on a Friday night.
Staff, anyone in particular that you would like to have stay to be part of your discussion on homelessness? All right. Do you agree that folks, do you agree that Natalie is excused? Fantastic. I think that we agree that you should have the expertise in the room that you need. So I'm pretty sure you need Kurt. Who else?
I think it's everyone but Chris and Natalie.
Great, Chris and Natalie.
Brad is welcome to stay.
Great. But they're going to do it with popcorn and milk duds, and it's going to be great. Thank you all. All right. So let's now visit about homelessness. Right? No, this is my first time. right? The mayor's not here, and the mayor pro tem isn't running the meeting, so it fell to me. I was like the last person standing. So Matt and Rachel, you were the first ones to raise this, and then several of you sort of plus one-ed it with some additional perspectives. Since not everyone has had time necessarily to review your comments, did you want to reframe it for us, and how can we attend to it appropriately this evening?
I think Matt's got a nice list over there, so I'll turn it over to him. I will just say that we don't have a lot of opportunities to speak to each other in a room at the same time in a more unstructured format without Robert's rules. So that's why, and I will just note, I was thinking when I looked around the table last night, I think with the exception of Kurt, this whole table has changed since I got on council 3 years ago. I think everybody's new to their job. That I know, Allie, you were with the city, but I think maybe you had just taken over. We're in different positions. We're not directors, I think, with the exception of Kurt. So we have not, as a group, gotten to talk about this really crucial issue, nor as a council. I think as the new council members haven't done it. I think Junie and I, we had a little moment in like early 2020 with Adam Swetlick where we were right at I believe Aaron had left with the stomach flu from that first retreat where we had Aaron took off, we got into homelessness, but it was only for like 10 minutes, so we really have not had this opportunity, and so that's why Matt and I lifted up a couple of just thoughts we were having, and I also want to say I just got the treat of riding with about 40 minutes in a car ride with Megan to race to get here. We were out touring a safe outdoor space and day services center in Denver, and there's just a lot going on around the state, around the region, around the country on homelessness that we haven't had a chance to really just chat amongst ourselves in ways that we can help and make changes, and maybe, as I said yesterday, just not do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And I think with that we are not getting the results that we want for our community. Clearly, the community members who are most impacted I don't think their situation has gotten better in my 3 years. I'm guessing Bob would say the same thing, and Aaron for 7 years. So that's kind of where I was coming from with this, and I'll let Matt kind of run through what we had hotlined.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. So our obviously, I mean, our intent was to really just get this on the table and let the whole group sort of drive. But I think the one thing that we were really hoping on is we're not setting policy, we're not setting decisions, we acknowledge that. But to kind of have some direction, some outcomes that point us in a direction of where we're cumulatively thinking. So when it comes time to building some more cohesive, or when Kurt comes back to us in April, we've done some of that pre-work amongst ourselves so that those conversations are just more fruitful and we kind of get into action mode perhaps a step or two earlier than we otherwise would have been, maybe without this dialogue. So that was our kind of intent. And we had some areas that we sort of were hoping to get some outcomes on is, in stakeholder engagement, in really thinking about that larger strategy, that cohesive vision of where we want to go forward and tackle the areas that we're having a trouble with now. As it was brought up, is thinking about, is there a way to get fresh eyes on this? Is there a way to just get somebody who's just got a completely different vantage point to just kind of tell us what we're doing well, what we're doing right, maybe show us some things a little differently. And so Rachel's idea of a consultant might be helpful to get us just sort of just a different kind of barometer. Also thinking about how we think of that homeless strategy. I know we have a connected homeless strategy with the county. That was 2017. I think the situation of unhoused in our community is woefully different than 2017. So maybe what that looks like in revamping in conjunction with the county. And then that's really a fold into, can we get a good sense of where we want to go ahead of that conversation with the county. If we all come into that conversation all with 9 different ideas, we're going to get laughed out of that room. So it's really important that we have some cohesive set of asks, maybe demands, of what we want our county to partner with us on. And so this is a place for hopefully us to have that. What are the responsibilities? Housing, mental health, and drugs. What do we do with money? Who gets what? I mean, so I think those are questions there. I do want to respect, because Mark is not present, that we address his questions that he put in that hotline. Those are some thoughtful questions, and I think want to make sure we have some space to go through those. And then lastly, the other one is, what are the carrots and sticks that we want to be advocating for with regards to getting effective policy at both the county and the state level? So those are some things that I think are important for us to kind of embark on. So those are kind of a list of, at least from our hotline's perspective, that we wanted to kind of drive towards some directions or see if there's cohesive thought on any of those pieces, and just sort of open the floor for conversation as a stepping stone for many, many others to go forward as we try to evolve our strategy into something that we think we can believe in and will start to have positive impacts going forward.
And then Nicole, you had also added in the thread just about what we think about stakeholders to be broader and maybe also more specific as we think about specific categories of stakeholder groups. Is that right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure we clarify for the discussion. Are we talking about the broad category of homelessness? Are we talking about specifically single adult unsheltered homelessness? Like, where are we with this? Because there are lots of different ways that this
In the
appears.
hotline, I think we said unsheltered single adult.
Okay. That narrows it down a little bit. Okay. So others of you sort of sent some version of, yeah, that's an important topic. We should talk about that. Mark did have some very specific questions, wondering what you are thinking about this. I was actually thinking yesterday when the idea of the new news to me that you're having a joint session with the commissioners came up. I was like, oh yeah, you should probably think about this before you show up cold to that. And so I wonder if a place to start might be to hear from staff on if they had anything already planned for that conversation. Would that be useful, just to give you something to riff off of so you're not starting on a blank sheet of paper? Kurt, Nuria, do you have a plan?
Well, let me kick it off, and then
Yeah.
I'll send it to Kurt, because I'll say that we don't have a plan quite yet. We actually are scheduling a meeting with our county partners next week, hopefully to discuss a little bit about it. The high-level plan had been originally, let's talk about our homeless strategies in general and what we do in conjunction. We know that there are things that we do together as a partner. We know that you all had a desire originally when the topic came up to talk a little bit more about what is the county's role. Could the county be doing something differently? What is the city's role? There's another series of conversations to be had that frankly is about what the city does and how we respond in homelessness. And I know that's a discussion, frankly, the county is hoping not to get mired into, that really is a sort of a separate conversation. But so we'll continue to be thinking about that. This conversation will be helpful as we think about it, because what it may do is help us understand a little bit more of the direction you may want to go to, and we'll be able to bring that to our county conversations. But Kurt, not to put you on the spot, but I'm about to. What's fascinating about the conversation is that it's so timely, and it's been so timely to all the directors that are around this table talking about the issue. But in particular, I know, Kurt, you've been thinking a lot about our homelessness strategies in general. You know more intimately than any of us. It's been a while since those have been looked at, and have been thinking about that as well. So I just invite you to share any thoughts about that or anything else that has come up.
Sure. Good evening. So Kurt Fernhaber, supporting Housing and Human Services. So just to respond to your one comment, Rachel. So as was stated, our strategy is about 5 years old now. In our creation with Boulder County and Longmont and Homeless Solutions for Boulder County came about that time, but slightly after. So we're on sort of a 5-year refresh of that. We've had conversations over the last couple of months at HSBC about also the significance of the 5 years, and we've had conversations about having an outside consultant coming after 5 years and say, okay, this was our starting point, this was our strategy, how did it work? Looking at the outcomes, looking at what has changed, like you mentioned, and any changes in sort of best practice that have occurred since 5 years ago, and really having someone come in and do an evaluation of the various programs that we do and how they integrate. With that said, what we have now is significantly different than what we had 5 years ago, and even what we plan to have. So the programs have emerged as well. So I would support council's direction in having that sort of assessment done. of the various programs. I think a good conversation to have would, with the commissioners is, you know, what's the scope of that? Is it an HSBC thing? Is it a Boulder thing? We're very our programs are very tied, are closely knit together with Boulder County and Longmont. Our data system, we use the same data system. So I would certainly see advantages to having it more of a collaborative approach. But I would welcome to hear that conversation with the commissioners as well.
Thanks, Kurt. And the other thing I don't want to forget is, Bob, you had also had on your list the camping ban enforcement, which seems like is also part of this. So Rachel or Matt, maybe we could start with you all. Rachel in particular, you said doing the same thing all over again, expecting a different result. Have you given any thought to what else you might want to see folks consider trying?
A lot of thought over 3+ years. So, you know, I've long advocated for safe outdoor spaces, and so I think that we could look pretty hard at, and Matt and I hotlined a resolution that the city of Oakland had done a couple years ago, where their city council really laid out, like, here are places that we are going to prioritize enforcement of the camping ban, and then there's these other places where we're not going to. And so I think that looking for places where we can stop bopping people around who are in the city and sleeping and living here would be a helpful step. And I know that Joe's team works hard on you know, cleanups, and so is there a way that we can not be sort of cleaning up unnecessarily? And I again would tie that from my perspective to the visit that I did today. And I don't know if anyone, you know, if Megan wants to speak to her experiences at Safe Outdoor Spaces or not, but you know, it is a lovely thing to have people who are living in kind of orderly tents that are not being moved around and have access to showers and a little kitchen area and a heater in the tent, and support like the outcomes that we were described today are pretty amazing in Denver. Like they're exiting a lot of people into homes, and she described the gal who herself has lived experience and was formerly unhoused, was saying, you know, we have an agreement with people to kind of do a survey of the tent once a week to see like if people are having hoarding tendencies, to sort of help them to debride and be prepared to move into their next housing situation, and, you know, help them be prepared to get along with neighbors and mediate things like that. So it looks like, to me, like a pretty successful program. I know that it would be difficult from staff perspective to tack it on, which is part of why I had suggested like maybe consultants can help us look through things or advise, like, is that a best practice? My gut says, and the outcomes in Denver would seem to support that it is a good way to move. I would love to see us do that. I'm leery of sort of, I don't know, overstepping my bounds in what we're going to talk about or center it on what I want. And I'm not a complete expert in this topic. I did run as a COO a group home for people who had exited homelessness. So I have some ideas. I think that also there's some national best practices that, you know, sanctioned outdoor space tents aren't the best. Like, you'd rather do modular or manufactured housing. That's better. We heard today that it's like $400 or $500 for a rather industrial tent. It's $10,000 or $11,000 for the kind of next step up, what were pallet homes, and then it's like $40,000 for a tiny home. So you know, I think for those sorts of things, you have to identify plots of land. So you know, where you can site that, ideally city-owned land or county-owned land. So that is one thing I would like us to look at. We also have a day center, day services and center idea happening. When Bob and I toured, we heard loud and clear that overnight shelters are around the state converting to 24-hour shelters, and it's not helpful to have people have to leave in the morning and go somewhere else. So day services is great, but 24-hour shelter is better, and then you just have the services at the day place, and you're coordinating people with services. So those are a couple ideas that I would throw out that I've been advocating for a number of years, and I think that I am empathetic and understand that it is unideal to have people camping in certain spots. I empathize the parents near the high school. I don't think that's ideal. I don't think bike paths are ideal. I don't think parks are ideal. So not insensitive to that, but I think the other part of that equation is then we have to have more places that people can go.
Thanks, Rachel, for kicking off the conversation. Nuria, did you want to jump in before we
I just had a clarifying question, because what I'm hearing, Councilmember, is a desire to explore a variety of potential transitional housing options that could go from tents, that could go from modular housing to tiny home villages, for a variety of things, but there's a desire perhaps for a potential consultant to think about what that transitional housing could look like, and if that is in fact a best practice. Is that sum a little bit of that up?
I think so, and I think that's how we tried to present it in the hotline post in advance. That we pointed to I think Mountain View, California, and Denver as examples of one with manufactured housing and one with tents, and both are having success.
Mm-hmm. Other council perspectives? Oh, there's so many. Matt, go ahead, and then Bob, and then Aaron, and then everyone over here. Just really everyone.
I really want to listen to my colleagues because we
Great.
put up the hotline, but I'd just say, like, from where I agree with what Rachel has said, so sort of validate what she was saying. And they're not mutually exclusive, and some of these are temporally different. A tent stuff can be done lickety-split. Modular homes and larger things can take a while. So there's a way that we can sort of think about short, medium, and long term in terms of the resources we have and how quickly we can lift some of these up. So that's something that I think is important for us, because the critical need is yesterday. And so the urgencies here, unlike some things where we have a long runway to plan, we have to think about how we get these things up yesterday, last week, last year. So that's the critical time frame of that, I think, is what's really interesting to me, is what can we lift up the fastest, perhaps even the least expensive, so we already provide relief early, and then those longer things can phase in as necessary, but not letting maybe perfection be the enemy of the immediate good that we can do for a number of people.
And I just want to make sure Kurt has an opportunity, if he has questions, to jump in as well. But it would be good, as you continue to have this conversation, to have some clarity if the desire is to, because, for example, tenting, which can be quick, is it just a place where people can set up a tent? Is it a place where people can set up a tent and we add bathrooms or hand washing facilities? If that is the case, then we also need to amend the current policy that bans camping everywhere. So as we continue to have the conversation, your clarity will be the best gift that we can have as we continue to move our work forward.
Perhaps additional members of council will provide some clarity in their own comments. Bob, go ahead, and then we'll go to Aaron.
Well, I'm not going to add any clarity, but I do want to add an overlay of of consideration as we consider all services, whether it's overnight housing services, day services, longer-term tenting, which I think Kurt's last memo from a year and a half ago estimated it was roughly $24,000 a camper per year, to all the things that Rachel talked about, the whole continuum, food, everything. And I guess overlaying all of that, whether it's housing, food, mental health services, whatever, always has to be the question, for whom? For whom are we going to provide that service? Is it all comers? Because there's 500,000 homeless people in this country. And so are we going to provide that service to 500,000 people? Or are we going to provide it to the few tens of thousands of people who live in the state of Colorado? The 150 to 200 homeless people live in Boulder today, but there's going to be a different 150 or 200 people that live in Boulder next week and the week after and the week after. I don't have an answer to that question, but I just want to make sure that we're not thinking that this is like a finite, small group of identifiable people, Chuck, Mary, Bill, Bob, and all we have to do is take care of them, and then we're all done. Because, as Kurt has pointed out to us, on average, we have 4 new unhoused people show up in town every day, and they replace 4 people who move on to the next town. And so What's the cutoff? Is it 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year? No cutoff, all comers. We're going to provide all housing and all food and all sheltering and all everything to all comers, or are there cutoffs? And if there are cutoffs, then we run into some legal problems. And so I'm not providing solutions here. I'm just throwing out problems or challenges. Super helpful, yeah, I know. And so I don't have an opinion on any of these things. I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of the for whom question, because that's going to be so important as we calculate the costs of whatever it is we want to provide. And it also is just an operational function. Like, does anybody who shows up get whole panoply of services, or are there some filters here?
Hard questions. Thanks, Bob. Aaron?
Nothing about these issues is simple, right? This is an incredibly difficult situation that our society as a whole has, to some extent, created and completely failed to solve. But I really appreciate Matt and Rachel for bringing this forward for us to discuss tonight, because we need to do some additional things, and we need to change at least some of our strategies, because I think as anyone who walks around town for a few days can tell you, is that we have a significant and major problem with unsheltered homelessness in our town. It's not good for the people experiencing it, and there are impacts to the community, the rest of the community from it as well. And so we need some additional and new solutions. And so I really appreciate you bringing this forward. So Kurt, I appreciate you talking about that 5-year point. Yeah, I was there in 2017, right? And we approved the plan and did a lot of new things that I think many of them have been very successful. We've housed any number of people, right, which has been amazing. But clearly we haven't fixed the problem, right? And so bringing in a consultant to look at what the opportunities are from a national best practices perspective sounds really good to me. And the thing that I would say about that is what I'd really love to look at are the gaps in what we provide and potential solutions to those gaps. Because I think we designed a really good system in many ways, but there are people for whom the solutions that we have don't work. And an analysis, okay, whose needs are not met by our current services, and in what different ways, and what are ways that folks who aren't getting help or aren't working for, what could work for them. And so the safe outdoor space alternative, I think, is a really good one. I've supported that for years. I think it's very much worth looking at. And Nur, I would say to your question there, personally, I mean, I would not say, well, just, hey, that parking lot, anybody set up a tent over there. I wouldn't go that way. I mean, maybe the consultant would tell us that's the best practice. I'm going to guess they're not going to say that. So, I would say the Denver model, if we're talking about tents, the Denver model is, to me, a minimum in terms of you're providing high-quality tents with heaters, with bathroom facilities and showers and things like that. So obviously I'm not the expert here, and I would look to an expert for their recommendations, but from what I've seen in my research on it and visiting places around the country, that would be kind of my minimum on a tent thing. And Matt, I thought Matt had good points about that. There are probably tiers to this, right? Because an appeal of a safe outdoor space is that it's relatively cheap and can be stood up relatively quickly if you can find an operator to help you run it, which is a really hard problem that will need a lot of work. But then the other, like tiny home villages have been very successful. They cost more, they take longer to set up. But I think we probably need a variety, a tiered set of solutions for different people's situations. And so I think we do need to do some things more and differently. And I would very much like an expert to come in and help us figure that out.
Nicole?
Yeah, been trying to write down a bunch of thoughts as people are talking, because I got a lot. It's an area I spend a lot of time thinking about. So I think, one of the things I'm hearing folks say is, we need an outside consultant. I feel like we actually have a lot of expertise already right here in our community. And we've had a lot of folks in our community giving us ideas on what to do for quite some time. So thinking back to early 2021, I believe it was HAB and HRC put together a joint couple of white papers on some ideas that they thought might work in Boulder and how to make some evidence-based solutions work in Boulder. I believe one was on tiny homes, the other was on safe parking. And they had some very specific ideas about how to make that work right here in our city. I think last fall, and I think just recently again, for possibly the first time ever, all the providers in our community came together and sat at the same table and came up with a list of things that they would like to see in our community. So I think, we've got that information from the folks who are already working here, who have some ideas. Certainly our county and city staff that have been working on these issues for a long time. And then we also have a lot of people with lived experience in our community, and shout out to one in the audience. So, I'm not sure, what would an outside person bring that we don't already have here? So I think that's one question that I have. And I think even regionally, we've got some good ideas. I mean, Rachel, I heard you talking about some of the folks that you've been visiting. I know you went up to Fort Collins as well to check out the Murphy Center and some other places. So I think even regionally, we have a lot. And the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, they had in their report, I believe it was the 2020 report. I know they just released the 2023 one. I haven't dived into it yet. But they had a list of kind of all the services that needed to be in place in order for a community to have a thorough response to unsheltered homelessness. So, I think even there we have a lot of expertise to draw from. Some of the other things that I think about as we dive into thinking about unsheltered homelessness is, what are we cutting to get the money and staff time? That is, I think, something always, to think about. We are resource limited for now. Maybe the charter committee, AKA the tax committee, can think about some
Tax and
things, right?
shoes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's a very real question, right? None of these things are free. None of them are going to just pop out of thin air. So how realistically are we going to get to these places? Where do we start? I think, once we have an idea of all the world of possibilities that's out there, how do we then prioritize in terms of what's going to get us there faster? And, the other thing that I think about a lot, and I think even just seeing how unsheltered homelessness seems like it's been rising in our community over the last couple of years over the course of the pandemic, how are we working on prevention? Because we can keep putting Band-Aids on this gaping wound, but at what point are we also really, truly investing in some of the prevention measures for homelessness? And so these are things like increasing housing costs. And I love that about our council, that the one thing we always agree on, almost, is housing. We've got, rising economic inequality and insecurity. We have a rising mental health crisis. We have addiction on the rise. Chief, I know you know as well as I do, drugs are increasing, and they are not good drugs that are out there right now. And it's not just our unsheltered folks who are having those experiences. So what are we doing about that too? Because that also is a factor in all of this. So anyway, that was a long list of things, but I'm not quite done. And I think, the other thing that we really need to figure out is, what problem are we trying to solve? Is it people camping in public spaces? Is it people camping, period? Because I know that for some folks in our community, having people live in tents is not satisfying as a solution. Is it the lack of support for mental health and addiction, lack of providers, things like that? Is it housing insecurity? Is it homelessness? I mean, are we really trying to eradicate homelessness in our community? I think it's really essential that we figure out, what we are interested in. And then I think another really critical thing for us to get on the same page about is, are we working with the same facts? So, do we understand who our unsheltered homeless are? Because I'm out there almost every week working with a lot of folks in the community who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And many of them are the same people I've been seeing for 2 years. So, there's this idea of how many folks are coming to our community and are new, and are people coming here just because of our services? That's not what I hear from folks who are out there. I think understanding what are evidence-based solutions, that's a really critical question. How does our unsheltered homeless community differ from our sheltered community? Because I think, we think a lot that it's just people who are unsheltered who are coming to our community, but I'm sure that many of you, like me, also know very few people who are from Boulder, who were born here. So we come from all over. So I think understanding some of those things, and then because of our racial equity goals, what are the equity implications of how we are providing services and how we're thinking about prevention? I think these are all really important questions. So I know pretty much all I have are questions, but these are, I think, some of the things that we need to understand what it is we're trying to do and what the world of possibilities are before we dive into what we can do. And also just this idea of relying on the expertise that's already here and the folks who've already done a lot of work.
Thanks, Nicole. Tara and then Junie.
I would like to have a frank discussion, so I'm going to be frank and let's see how it goes. All right. Okay, good. We have so many problems in this city, state, country right now. So we could just sit here forever and talk about them, which we've all done, and it's very depressing. So instead, I'm going to talk about some of the things that are more practical. So for me, when it comes to sanctioned encampments, why I like the idea of a consultant, I get your idea, is why we have a lot of experts, but also this subject has become really politicized. And so it makes me more comfortable to have somebody that isn't on any quote side to come in and just look at everything in a just very practical way without putting anything on Twitter or Nextdoor, to be frank. If I say that my goal, for instance, is there's a few things I worry about. When it comes to encampments, I'm worried about the sexual assault and the drug use, especially the meth epidemic. And if we don't admit that there is a meth epidemic, I realize that it's everywhere, but it's also in our encampments. And I don't think it's good. I think it's terrible. And my husband's psychiatrist says, when you continually take meth, it's very hard to, after the 5th time for it to turn around. So we have a huge problem on our hands. So when we say, for instance, we want bathrooms, well, we have to make sure that those bathrooms are built in a way so that we don't have to reconstruct them with meth use, because that is going to happen. So I would really like to be frank and not worry so much about feelings, but just just say we have a problem with meth use. We have a problem, yes, we have a problem with meth use, but also with the unhoused. And it's not a small thing to figure out what's a solution. I personally would rather see transitional homes like the kind you had in your pictures from Mountain View. I like those because I don't visualize people being in Colorado in blizzards feeling safe in a tent, even if it's heated. I would rather see little, not even tiny homes, but whatever that second tier was, in a row. I would like to see that. We also need to talk about how much money it is per person. We do, because we do spend a lot of money on homelessness. And now we're going to spend a whole lot of money on a sanctioned encampment that holds, 25 people at $35,000 a person. So I also have a lot of questions that I'm bringing up, but I'd like it to be that we talk about it in a frank way, and what are we going to do about, meth and how it affects our solutions. And why I like the consultant idea is I'm worried that, we saw two sanctioned encampments that worked, but if there are 100 that don't work and 2 that do work, those are things we need to know. How many actually did work and didn't work? So is there more success when we talk about best practices? Is there more success all over the country in similar cities with which method? That's the question. So even though I can't visualize tents being great, I'm not saying that they're not the thing, but at least if we get somebody who's not politically or emotionally involved in the discussion in the city, we would perhaps get more facts. And even, facts are in the eye of the beholder. So when people tell me, oh, well, look at these latest figures or whatever, it depends who's saying them. I can hear 2 different things with the same facts from 2 different sides, to be honest. So that's why I like the idea of the consultant. Do I have anything else I want to say? This, that. So to me, the franker, the better.
Thank you, Tara. We'll hear from Junie and then from Rachel and then from Lauren.
Thank you so much. And also, I was just thinking to myself earlier, I'm not sure if I greeted all of you. It is truly an honor to serve with all of you, by the way. And I'm glad to be here tonight. I want to say what I hear from Rachel about the safe outdoor spaces. I actually do like the idea. So I've been on the same side with you since we've been on council on this issue, whether I've vocalized it or not. I like the idea of the modular homes, the tiny homes, and I do like the idea of having an expert. And part of the reason why, again, I think that would free up some time for Kurt, as opposed to having your team and your staff doing all that work. You can, have someone else look into it as well. And I can imagine, as Tara mentioned, it would depoliticize things in a way for community members as well. And I think as of right now, that's a good idea. But I think maybe part of it as well is that we have to consider scope. What is it that we want that consultant to do for us? Because I remember we had either a council meeting, a general business meeting, or a study session. We talked about where, right? We had some conceptual ideas of maybe, I'm thinking, we talked about some industrial areas. So I think, hey, if we're gonna have a consultant, where in the community is that something that we can have one, or is it two consultant, one who looks at land use, and then you can look at the other issues or ideas surrounding that particular issue. And there's another thing I wanted to say as part of this conversation. And I think as you live, you're growing, you're learning. And I just think, again, as we mentioned tonight, that homelessness is an extremely complex situation. And you mentioned what is facts. It means different things to different people based on their experiences. And I was like, yes, that is so true, because I live in South Boulder, and for about 3 or 4 months, I was working in Denver, and I was taking the FF1 to Union Station. And, we think about Denver doing a good job, according to some of us. There are so many homeless people living in Union Station. It's amazing to see that, and you're wondering, wow, I heard the city's doing great work, but when I showed up down here, it's a whole different world. It's very, 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 very different, and it's a different experience. And I'm not sure I can say, when I see these other human beings down there with me as part of that experience, I can't put it in positive terms. So there is that aspect of it as well. So that is my thoughts. Thank you.
Junie. Rachel, and then Lauren.
Just wanted to add a couple things that I forgot to mention earlier. I think to Tara's point about the, sort of another reason maybe to have the outside consultants is maybe just some community buy-in for people who might be skeptical of, like when I had requested, Nicole referred to the HAB and HRC report. That was a request I think maybe Aaron and Junie and I made. I don't remember, but it was not, we appoint those boards, and it was not seen as an apolitical result. And same thing with our local providers and stakeholders, and which includes obviously people with lived experience. If we have somebody who is seen as neutral and objective and sort of an expert, I think it could be a national expert who coincidentally lives in Boulder or in Denver or whatever. Like, I don't mean we have to pull someone in from New Jersey, but that person can pull together the stakeholders. So I'm not suggesting that we don't listen to the people with the wealth of knowledge here, but that should be part of it. So just wanted to clarify that part about community buy-in and that stakeholders would certainly be included and listened to. Also, someone had said that it's hard to find someone to operate these spaces. I wanted to say that the gal today said she'd love to come work in Boulder. She's the one who runs the really good spots in Denver. So I gave her my card. I have her card. Should we go that route? They're doing a really good job. We also had a couple presentations today, and Megan, I hope you'll correct me if I'm misstating this, but as I think most of us know, the money saved by getting individuals housing or off the streets and reduced court contacts and ER trips is we have a savings rather than it actually costing us societally. So I don't know how you convert, if ER trips are down 75%, but we're paying for people in an SOS type environment. is there a way for us to get that money like from the ER, basically, or from the hospital system to pay for that? I don't know how that works. You know, societally, it's a savings, but as a city, how do we convert that? So that's maybe a question for the consultant. You know, Aaron mentioned gaps, and it has felt to some degree like we've had more of a housing only policy, and so you know, the housing first has really been great, I think, for people who get the vouchers, but it has left a lot of people who don't have them and are still unsheltered without much help. And some of the goal of Housing First is to stabilize people, and then you can see those benefits of the reduced ER visits and the reduced criminal contacts, and people starting to have supports to get sober and the other things that they need. So just wanted to flag that, you know, that it is a big gap. Tara mentioned weather. The gal today said that they, you know, in the last 3 years, they've had a lot of really cold nights, and almost no one wants to leave the tents in those sanctioned outdoor spaces that they've got a nice heater inside of them, and people don't want to leave their home. Like they don't want to leave their belongings and don't want to leave their home. So it does actually work even in this weather. They also mentioned that crime rates, not just inside these sanctioned spaces, but in the community around them, goes down. So like, it's pretty amazing the success that is bringing to the communities. And I think that is all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Lauren, what's on your mind?
Thank you. So, I appreciate everything everyone said. I think there's not very much left. But just for my 2 cents on the topic, when you brought up bringing in a consultant, one of the things that appealed to me about that specifically is if the county is willing to also collaborate in that, because I think that, you know, one of the issues, and this has been brought up a little bit, but the shelter and sort of what best practices currently are and how that can be best utilized. And I think that in some respects, the city and the county don't, while we all want to do the best for our communities, I think that our goals don't always completely align. And I think that there are ways in which the shelter is managed that puts some additional burden on the city. And I think that a consultant might help facilitate some of those discussions. But I think, you know, as Nicole brought up, relying on the local knowledge and making sure that we are really including voices of people who are affected and who understand these systems from, you know, lived experience is really important. I think that similarly, a consultant could be helpful in helping us understand better whose needs aren't being met. Again, just because they don't have the skin in the game that, you know, we have, and through the programs, you know, that you've spent a lot of time developing. So I think that might help give us an unbiased new, or biased in a different way, just a new look at the problems we're facing. And in terms of transitional housing, I would really support us looking at sanctioned encampments or tiny homes. You know, I think Denver's model is a particularly successful model that we would be smart to try and learn as much as we can from. One of the things that they do there is the locations aren't permanent, so there isn't as much. They change locations within the city. I think it's every 2 years, and so there's a little bit less like this is going to be in my neighborhood forever kind of opposition, is my understanding. So I think that we might want to think about that as we think about what kinds of housing we might choose, and, you know, if it is a relocatable thing that has implications. Yeah, but yay, let's look at more solutions.
Yay. Yeah, Nicole, go ahead, and then Tara. And then Matt.
Yeah, I just had a couple follow-ups after listening. I wanted to kind of lift up one thing Matt said about, short-term solutions through long-term solutions. I mean, part of the issue with having a consultant is that it takes time, right? And as we talk, right, as many groups have talked and, have an HRC and all those folks have talked over the years, people have died. And I think that's worth us remembering. And so, as folks are at risk who don't have shelter, what are we doing that's going to ensure that this isn't just getting the can kicked down the road again? That there's a conversation that's had, we come up with some new ideas, new council comes in, and everything kind of is overturned. So what are the safety things that we would put in place to make sure that this is work that if we start it, it will continue? I think that's, if we're going to be spending more time talking about solutions, I think it's critical that we really figure out how does the buck stop in the next couple of years, and we really start moving forward with action. And I think to that long-term point, if we aren't also focused on prevention, this also gets so much worse in many ways. And I think that idea of family homelessness that we really haven't had a deep discussion on either is a really important one, because family homelessness does predict adult homelessness. And so what are we doing to prevent this issue as we're investing time, resources into trying to create some stopgap solutions and address immediate needs for those who are unsheltered? And I think too, one question that I have is, for right now, my understanding is that the federal money that comes in for homelessness really is based on this housing first strategy. And I think we're all seeing that there are some issues there. And how do we fill that gap if we're thinking about solutions that aren't housing first until the federal government gets to some different kinds of funding mechanisms? So just something I think for us to think about too, that if there are things we're changing, does that impact the funding that we would be receiving for services, and what do we do about that?
Thanks, Nicole. Tara, and then Matt, and then Aaron.
I just want to go back to what my colleague Junie said, which was really a good observation, is although Denver does have this successful sanctioned encampment, let's say it's successful, there is also a lot of homelessness in Denver. So let's say that sanctioned encampments are not decreasing homelessness, but they're helping some people. So I wouldn't mind if for me to even have this conversation, and if you say yes to this, council, this is me making a deal here, no. If you say yes to this, then I'm going to say yes, I don't care, sanctioned encampments, tiny houses, everything, do your thing. But I think that the goal for me would be for the public spaces to become used again. Like, for instance, the degradation at the creek, which we all agree with, and the children's fishing pier, and the bike underpasses and such. To me, the end goal would be for the public to be able to use that again. My other end goal is to have a place where people who are who have mental health and behavioral health issues to actually get better. And then also drug addiction facility, what's the word? Drug treatment facilities, thank you. But for me, ultimately, it is also that, the public spaces is on the community's mind. They want the public spaces to be used for the public and for kids and to feel safe, and I think that that's valid. But we as a council have to help these people, so I think that's also valid. But are we going to then say that we're going to allow and we're going to be okay with our public spaces being places where people have encampments? Or if we do this, then no, we don't have to do that. You know where I'm coming from? Matt, can you help me? Am I unclear?
He's next anyway.
I'm trying to say it in a non-frank way.
I thought you were just frank.
You did great, Frank.
Yeah. Frank Weiner.
Let's hear from Matt, and then from Aaron, and then staff. I'd love to give you a chance to reflect on what you've heard and see if you have any questions for council or any sort of ideas of your own based on their thoughts.
For one, I'm really liking this conversation. It's humbling to sort of be faced with the challenges we're faced with, but I also feel really confident that given the oxygen and if we commit the time, this group will grab this bull by the horns, I think, in a lot of ways and get to some better places than we are now. But it is all based on we got to give it the time. We got to give it the time where we can flush through it, allow staff to chew on it. So I think this is a great first step in for us doing that. And I just hope that we can all commit to carrying on this conversation, not a year from now, but at a much greater regular cadence so that we can actually make some of these changes. So I just love hearing what my colleagues are saying. And as I've heard that, there's a couple things that touch on in terms of, and I think it was like, well, what are we focusing on? I mean, there's this whole gamut from, are we dealing with the acute issue of encampments all the way, are we trying to fundamentally solve homelessness? I mean, the gamut is gigantic. And I think we have to step back a little bit and realize this is where the system is kind of failing, because here is a city having to think about the entire spectrum. Whereas that's where the breakdown is from federal and state and county support to handle those different levels of granularity, and that's just not happening. So we're at sort of the forefront of that. So two things jump out immediately for me, again, which are sort of like, what do we come out of tonight on? I think we can have these greater conversations, but tonight is this immediate tension with encampments. To me, that's the most acute thing. Though I'm not running for re-election, but those that are, homelessness will be the most dominant issue on the this year's election, bar none. Just look at the Denver mayor's race, and you don't have to look any further. So what are we doing on the acute issue? Yes, we want to solve homelessness, but the acute issue facing most people when you talk to them about what's going on with our unhoused situation is the encampments and what we're trying to do, whether that being creating safe environments for causeways on bikes and safety around schools, to what are we doing to actually support folks so that when they do get met with our cleanup teams, where can I go? And we have a suite of options for people to go to at different barriers of entry so that we have a welcoming place where they can have a safe environment to be. So that to me is the tension that we have to get to, and they're not mutually exclusive. Purely enforcing does not mean we foreclose greater support and vice versa. So I think we can do both, and I think that's the most immediate thing that we need to be tackling, to be frank, to steal your frankness. The second one has to do with the prep for the county. I'm largely, for a stronger word, I'm appalled at, with the exception of maybe Longmont, our sister cities are doing effectively nothing. I mean, you just go to Louisville, Lafayette websites. You literally go to the Louisville website, and I'm not to try to bash our sister city here, but you literally search homelessness, and two things come up, and they have nothing to do with homelessness. It's just a word randomly inserted into two articles. And then you look at another one that just lists all the other shelters in the region. I mean, there's just no cohesive strategy with just our cities right there. So to me, the real rubber meets the road when we walk into that county commissioner meeting and we demand, not ask, demand that they start to create this accountability. And there's the carrot, and then there's the stick. And the county's the only one that can offer the stick for those other communities to step up. Because for us, the challenge is we cannot house and bring and take care of everybody. But if everybody's sharing in it, then if we are in a situation where people are, hey, we realize it's a bad weather night, we're going around checking in with folks, hey, where can I be? Well, you can't be out camping, but you can be here, here, here. Well, I don't have any room at these places, but you know what? Because we're all connected, I know that there's 3 spots over in Louisville, and we can get you on a bus there, and you're gonna have a safe, secure night on it when it's cold. That is the demand I think we need to make, because we cannot solve it from encampment to ending the crisis of homelessness in this community. And those to me are the two things out of tonight that I'm maybe most interested in getting at, is what is our strategy with the commissioners, and what is our plan of attack on encampments very specifically, because I think we got to move. And maybe to Nicole's point, like, let's go, like, what are those easy lift up things that we can start with? And if we have a consultant, maybe they're thinking medium long term, but we're not letting those things get in the way of the immediacy of the impacts that are in front of us.
Thanks, Matt. Hold on. Want to hear from Aaron? And then do you want to hear from staff before you all jump in? And Bob's like, no, I don't want to hear from staff.
I do, but everyone's going to divide the tap level.
Yep, Judy has a colloquy, and then I have a time check question before we know what's next. Go ahead, Junie.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment made by Matt, because I've heard it's so interesting when we sit where we are and we look at the people in Louisville and Superior, the leaders over there, and we're saying they're not doing enough and we want them to do more. And I've been in rooms and in conversations where I've heard Boulder's creating the housing problems for us. So they think we're creating the problem for them, for their community, and we're also looking to them. And I was just thinking, again, Lauren, you're part of the consortium of cities. How can you tap into that to help us and be part of that conversation as well, to say, hey, we do have housing issues that we are confronting as a city. How can we bring all these regional stakeholders, the same thing that Rachel did with the gun violence prevention? Can we do something similar to bring all these stakeholders into the room to be part of that conversation? Because you looking at them and being passionate from here is not solving the problem, and them having their own perspective thinking that we are the problem is not helping either. So how do we all come together to the table and find solutions in that way? Thank you.
Yes, and then really Aaron's going to go next.
So we have been having conversations around this in the consortium. I mean, housing is the top of everyone's mind. And I guess one thing I just want to bring up is that the challenges and the solutions look different for different communities, right? So there are a lot of communities that are working really hard to build tremendous amounts of housing, and we see this in surrounding communities, that they're growing really fast and that they are providing market rate housing at costs that Boulder simply cannot. And so they see that as a big part of what they are doing, to help alleviate housing issues. And so, yes, they might not be solving homelessness in the way that we want them to be, but we all sort of have different advantages and disadvantages and can target, different areas of this crisis differently. Just to put that thought in.
Before we hear from other folks, when do you all think this meeting is ending? Because on the agenda it says 8, but my calendar invitation went to 9. So I'm not sure if we have technically 5 minutes or technically an hour and 5 minutes. I'm agnostic on the point, but just want to know what you thought. 9. Okay, fantastic.
Or maybe 8:30. I mean, we could.
Right, I mean, we don't have to go until 9.
Here. Goals.
I don't want to panic. I just want to make sure that we're cool, that we're going to carry on for a little bit. I'd like to hear from Aaron, and then from Bob, and then Nicole and Tara if you have stuff. And then I really would encourage you to take a minute and hear from, and then Rachel. No, okay. I want to hear from staff.
Maybe we could
take a 5-minute break.
Bob and Aaron go. We have a break.
Fine. That's what I was thinking too. Yep.
And then
Yep.
the staff should
We all have a third bite of the apple.
Great. So many apples you're healthy people with the apple eating. All right, let's do Bob, or Aaron, and then Bob, and then break. And then any council members that need to say a thing before we hear from staff, I'll hear from you. Then we'll hear from staff, then we'll do council and see where we are. Cool?
Yes.
Cool. All right, Aaron, you're so patient. Go.
Yeah, well, I would, just to Lauren's point and Ginny's, I don't think we need to be oppositional with our neighboring cities. No offense, Matt, but they're working hard on a lot of things, including some big affordable housing projects over in Lafayette in particular, and Louisville's working on some of that stuff too. But the energy to bring to the county, I think, is extremely important, because the county is the recipient of most of the housing and human services funding, in particular for our area. And they're responsible for the entire county, including some of those smaller cities, and they have a lot of resources. And so I really think we need to bring that energy for working with them and getting more assistance with some of these solutions. I think it'll be an important part of that discussion with our county commissioners. Matt, all this other stuff you were saying I thought was right on target. I think you summarized those issues really well. And then, so just one thing I wanted to throw out about in terms of resources, Nicole, you mentioned about the federal funding is most of it is focused towards housing first. We do have a new funding stream coming online later this year, which is the Amendment 123 that the voters passed in November, and it has funding devoted specifically to homelessness solutions. And I think they're still developing those rules. I was on a call with some of the people implementing that at the state with the Metro Mayor's Caucus a few days ago. But they're eager to get that money out into our communities, and so I know we're really good at tapping grant funding opportunities. But while I'm not sure that they would go as far as funding a safe outdoor space with tents, they may well be able to fund things like modular housing. You know, it's quick, easy to stand up housing. And I think they're also funding studies. So we actually might be able to get funding for consultant work and such from them as well. So there's some opportunities there to help us move the needle more on these enormous problems we experience locally.
Thanks, Aaron. Bob, so patient.
Two broad categories. One, I had a list of things which we're not going to get to tonight, which I'm just fine with, which related to camping ban enforcement, and obviously that's another side of that coin. And I know Maris is here and Joe's here, and they can talk about that if they'd like to. Other than, I want to make sure that at some point in time, maybe it's not April 13th, but it may be at some point in time before the end of the year, we do have some discussions around enforcement, because we have some pretty large groups in the community who have some pretty big issues. One of them, I think, is looking to pull a ballot measure, so we can't ignore that. We have the city manager's 3-day rule. We have a lot of people who are not happy with that. We have a lot of people who are not happy with the underpasses. We have a big group that's pushing us on that. And so I think we can have lengthy discussions about sanctioned campgrounds, and maybe that'll solve some of these problems, and maybe it won't. But I think at some point in time, we do have to have a discussion around enforcement and cleanups. So I'm just going to leave it at that, because I know that the topic du jour seems to be sanctioned campgrounds, which maybe make that problem go away, but probably it won't. So the second thing I wanted to say is, first of all, I do support the idea of an expert. We have some experts right here, but I know that they always value the opinion of those who have expertise outside of Boulder, Colorado, and especially people who, as Tara said, people who have seen this day in and day out, who work with other cities, who've seen what works and what doesn't. And I think it's easy for us to get in a car and go down to Denver and say, wow, it's really cool down here. We should just do what they did. But there's lots of other cities where this has not worked. And I think we need to look at both successes and failures and figure out what's right for us. We have expertise in this town, but there's also expertise that exists in other towns. Lots and lots and lots of cities have tried what's being talked about tonight, and lots of cities don't do this anymore. And there's probably a really, really good reason why they don't do this anymore. And the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, which is the federal agency that kind of manages all this stuff, issued a white paper not long ago that talked about 4 issues related to sanctioned campground that I would hope that our expert would bring to the table and help us go through. And I'll just mention them very, very quickly. We don't have to get into them tonight. One is optics versus reality, which is, do these things really decrease the problems that we're trying to solve, which is reducing homelessness, reducing camping, reducing impact on the community. And so the U.S. Interagency Council strongly suggests that we look very, very closely on what works and what doesn't, because it's a feel-good measure. It may be a do-good measure, or it may not be a do-good measure, and so they really emphasize that. Number 2, the U.S. Interagency Council does want cities to focus on the costs of these things, because we have a finite amount of money, and all the things we talked about tonight are very, very expensive. Focusing just on campgrounds, which is probably the cheapest thing we could do. A couple numbers. Portland estimates that their cost per camper is going to be $36,000 per person per year. Los Angeles is doing it $31,000 per person per year. I think our staff actually brought us an estimate about a year and a half ago, $24,000 per person per year. Those numbers all are in the zip code of what it costs to rent an apartment, actually a little bit higher. And so we have to ask ourselves, is putting somebody in a tent in a parking lot, number 1, humane, and number 2, the most cost-effective use of millions of dollars of our money? Again, an expert can tell us that, but I think that's a factor. Third, the U.S. Council talks about the conditions around sanctioned campgrounds. Homeless shelters, bricks and mortar homeless shelters, have rules like prohibitions on violence, theft, drug dealing, and presumably a campground would have to have the same set of rules. Otherwise, you're just going to have Mad Max, right? And we have to ask ourselves, and again, an expert can help us with this, would we have a sanctioned campground that would have rules similar to what a bricks and mortar shelter has? If not, what are the conditions going to be? If yes, are there people who don't go to the shelter because they don't like those rules? And why would they go to a place without walls that has very, very similar rules? And then finally, what's our exit strategy? Are we going to set up a sanctioned campground and have that be there for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, forever? Because some cities have found that once you set these things up, they're very, very difficult to take them down because people depend on them. As a matter of fact, Oakland had one, and it took a fire that hurt a lot of people for them to close it down. Ontario, California set one up for 20 people. 400 people showed up. And so they get back, that goes back to the point I raised before about for whom they finally had to start doing some filtering and some qualifications on who actually got to live there. So how big is it going to be? How much is it going to cost? What's our exit strategy? And who are we helping? Those are all answers I think an expert can help us address. But these are people who have thought about this for years and years and years. We shouldn't make this stuff up right here, right now, today, or on April 13th, because there are people that are smarter than everybody in this room who know about this stuff, and I want to make sure we rely on them.
Thanks, Bob. All right, lovelies, it is 8:05. Now, Aaron, you don't generally give them very long breaks. 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 10. 10 sounds good. See, I was trying to channel you a little bit and be a little boss here. All right, come back at a quarter after, and then love to hear from any additional council members that need to say a thing, and then I really wanted to give you a chance to hear staff's reflections and questions for you. Go. Cole and Tara, do you want to say anything before I go to staff? Okay, fantastic. I will allow you to wait. So staff, you've heard a lot of ideas, a lot of questions. Kurt, maybe come to you first. Thoughts, reflections, or questions for council, sir?
Thank you for the very open-ended question. First of all, I really appreciate this conversation. I'm glad we could have it at the retreat. And this is one of those rare moments when I am pretty much agreeing with everyone that everything that everyone is saying. However, no. I just want to bring us back a little bit as well, if that's okay. So the strategy that was put in place when Aaron was here and Bob was here, I've mentioned this before, but our goal in that first year was to house 20 individuals. I think we housed 29 in that first year, if I recall. This past year, on average, 20 individuals have exited homelessness in the city of Boulder every month. Also at the time, if we look back when that strategy was in place, the city had just opened Lee Hill. It was a big effort. There was a lot of community engagement around that development, and it was a big step for the community. And when we look back on that project, and it's a partnership between the Boulder Shelter and BHP. And there was a report written a couple of years ago looking at the number of police calls before they got housed and after they got housed, and it's like, going from like 1,000 or several thousand with all of them combined to almost nothing, except for like medical calls. So it was phenomenally successful. The whole community knew about it. Some people more involved than others. And now we come to today. And I wanted to reflect on one comment that Rachel started with this tonight. She said over and over again, are we going to keep doing the same things over and over again? My answer is, I hope so. Because we're doing a lot of successful things. And I think one of the things we're not doing well is we're not celebrating. If you look at an individual who is experiencing homelessness, the impact on their life from exiting homelessness and having their life open to other opportunities is amazing. And that's our goal. That was the goal with the strategy at the very beginning. It wasn't to end encampments. It wasn't to end camping. It was to solve homelessness for individuals. So last month there was a bigger development that broke ground, the Bluebird development. It's kind of, I call it the Lee Hill 2. I'm not even sure if the camera did an article on it. There was no community engagement, or there was no community feedback. We weren't getting like emails. I think there was 2 or 3 council members that were there at the groundbreaking. Yeah, I do. Okay. Well, you don't have to confess. No, that's the point. But, if you go to another celebration that I think we miss is at Bridge House. When they have their graduation each year, we see people graduating from this program. It's phenomenal. And we've missed the opportunity to celebrate the good work that a lot of organizations are doing. I'll also take the opportunity to plug, as the community, and I hope a lot of people are listening right now, we need to support our nonprofit organizations. The work that they're doing is a lot more expensive to do than it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago, and they need resources. I think one of the downfalls of our homeless strategy is people have relied on the city to fix everything, and we need to rely more on our community as well. So the other thing, just as a data point, and I think part of our problem is scale. So if we look at self-reported data, we know that since we started that strategy, over 7,000 unique individuals have come through Boulder and have gone through coordinated entry. Our numbers are up about, I think, 6 or 7% from last year. But it's a big number. And so as we're talking about exploring a sanctioned camping site, I think staff is certainly supportive of looking at that. But it's 25 or 50 people or something like that a year out of, let's see, last year, what was it? I had my numbers here, 1,108 individuals that came through coordinated entry last year. I do think that I'm certainly proud to work for a city that has these conversations and is committed to having the biggest breadth of services that we can. So despite all that success, most of us don't feel good when we wake up in the morning thinking about these issues, because they're bigger than our community. They're impacting our community significantly. Some of the things we can have an impact on, some maybe we can't, at least directly. Our state hospital, half the beds are empty because they can't staff the hospital. We have individuals that have been waiting for months to get into the state hospital who are in our community right now, and they can't get the services that they need. That's having a real, that's really stressing our system. And there's a lot of things that we can't control, and there's a lot of things we can't fix. I think as a city, we really need to advocate at the state level and at the federal level to fix some of these things. So I'm also encouraged about the conversations around at least what can we do locally around behavioral health. I think we are spending probably about $2 million a year on prevention. And we can talk about that as a family homelessness discussion as well. The other thing that I think we need to celebrate is the fact that there's a lot more coordination on the work. There's coordination within the teams in the city, but also the organizations as well. Our high utilizer initiative, which was Maris's brainchild, has been really good but really tough. We're diving into the individuals, trying to solve some of the individual challenges that people are having, and we don't really have the infrastructure often to solve those. So it's rewarding that the operations team is making progress, but it's also daunting to think of the things that we need to change. As we look forward at sanctioned camping or other options, it's my belief that it's going to have very little impact on camping in our city. And I think that's something that we're all concerned about. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, though, because we do want to have a number of options. And I understand that some individuals actually feel more comfortable staying in a tent-like setting for various legitimate reasons than staying in a shelter. So we need to have lots of options. But I also think we need to answer, as a community and as council, some of the questions that Mark Wallach put out and that Bob has put out as well. And I so appreciate that we're having this conversation tonight, and I hope it can lead to other things this year. As far as capacity to look at this, I'm not sure that I can respond to that right now. I think maybe in 2 or 3 months, we'll have a better idea of that. Not that we couldn't get started on something, but we need to see how things go with the opening up the day services center. And we don't know how big of a lift that's going to be. Hopefully it will go smoothly. But that will be a bit of work. And as that gets going and gets some momentum, we may be able to look at other things. I fully support bringing in an expert. The sort of one of the last things I'll note is we often get emails, and you get emails from, hey, this city did that, and they're pretty awesome. Why can't we do that? If you dive in and look at their numbers, there's hardly a city around anywhere who's having the results that we're having per capita or the size of our community. So we need to be proud of that as well. Doesn't mean we need to stop working incredibly hard on this issue, though. I don't think any of us want to spend any more money on cleanups. It's the last thing we want to spend our money on, but it's kind of the reality of the world that we're living in right now. It's a challenge. Let's see, I think that might be all that I had. Oh, I wanted to mention 2 other things. So I mentioned last night that we had written several grants. So 2 of them specifically related to homelessness. Vicki and Megan wrote a grant for $2.7 million to assist with the infrastructure and opening of a day service center. We've also written a proposal for $3.1 million for respite services, which I mentioned last night, which is a big need in our community of individuals that don't have a place to stay and have medical or light medical needs. And we've had conversations with Boulder Community Health around this and with Clinica, and we hope that this grant will be successful. There are holes in our system, as there are in all systems, and we hope to continue to evolve our programs to address those. So the floor is yours, Megan.
No, I really do appreciate this conversation. Like Tara says, I nod my head and agree with everything you're saying, because I absolutely do agree with everything you all are saying. Like, these gaps, they happen everywhere. And to Junie's point, like, we go and look at the sanctioned camping, but then we also see all of the other camping that's happening in Denver. So these solutions are not easy. I don't think anybody, well, I know nobody has solved it, but I would agree with Kurt on the more options we have for folks, the more successful we will be. Like, again, I don't know that it solves the emails that I see on a very regular basis, but it does. I think it can only help the situation.
Megan, I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, my name's Megan Newton. I'm the policy advisor on homelessness for HHS.
Want to see, Joe, if you have anything that you want to share, and then Maris, if you have anything that you want to share. You do? Okay. He'll go first, and then you'll go last, and then we'll go to council. Cool. You, and then you. Joe will cover it all.
I'll
He's
cover
got a
it all.
list.
That's,
I can see the list.
that's a lot of pressure. So I'm Joe Tadeucci again. I'm the director of utilities. I manage the team that does the public spaces cleanup work in utilities. I would like to speak to one of the things that Kurt mentioned. And last night, Nuria talked about, we had an all-day workshop with our team. And one of the things that I've heard more lately from the people who have been out on the street doing the work for a few years and have experience with it is that they're very candid with us, and they say that, you can have all of these solutions, but there probably are right now, one person estimated 50 people who, if you have a sanctioned campground or something like that, and all these different options, they're still going to want to camp just the way they are now. So I don't want to say that to dissuade anybody from pursuing those options, but just managing expectations. And I have these people are really experienced, and I trust their opinions on it. And then just a suggestion, hearing your discussion tonight. Last night when I gave an update on the SAMPS program, I mentioned we have this written abatement protocol document. We have some very specific things in mind that we're working on to refine our procedures and to give our team that's doing the work the clarity that they need to be able to address some of the things. And I know there's a group of community members who is interested in the space around the schools. There's discussion about the 72 hours and the bike underpasses. And like I mentioned last night, I feel like we're at a place with our work where we see that too. And we have some very specific ideas of how to address that. So to make the lift that you all have, at least immediately here, easier, my suggestion would be let us work on that and let us update our procedures. And when we come back to you in April with an update, we can present that to you. Hopefully we'll already be trying some things. And so that would be an approach. At some point, if we have an answer to where is the other place that the people that we're doing the cleanups, where can they go? There's also going to have to be a real conversation around enforcement. The work we've been doing with the cleanup crew to date has really, I'm proud of the way that they do it compassionately and respectfully, and they really rely heavily on voluntary compliance, and there's reluctance from the team to push past that. And I think in our document, we do have to address what the options are if things escalate. And I think we really need the community support and the council support for that when we get to that place. So that is some of the stuff that we can, that we're working on, and just a suggestion to have us come back in April and talk to you about that.
Thanks, Joe. Maris?
Well, listen, for the first time in 3 years, I agree with everything that you're saying on this issue. I mean, I really do. It is a complex issue. And the police are just the enforcement arm, and we try to prevent as much as possible, but we're just the enforcement arm. And so the only thing that I want council to know is that the city manager, the city attorney, and the directors are committed to find alignment in the work. You know, the front end of the criminal justice system is working in tandem with what the police are doing. The back end of the criminal justice system are working. Whatever we decide that is, I really believe that all of those have to be in alignment for this to work. And there is a tremendous amount of community frustration and fear that I hear pretty much numerous times a day to my office. But I do believe in these people. They're very kind, they're very compassionate, and I think that with the city manager's assistance, we can all get in alignment and continue to do good work. And that's all I have.
Yeah, and first of all, Maris, I just want to give you more credit because you are not just enforcement. Your HOT team is amazing out there, and they do so much outreach, so much sort of helping people get to where they need, and they do so compassionately. And you are part of that process of outreach, and I just want to lift that up because a lot of times we just think of sort of the traditional mode of law enforcement, and I know that your team is so thoughtful about it. And what strikes me in this conversation, and again, glad to have it, and I know that it's not ending here, right? Like, this is a deep conversation that needed to happen, particularly with this council body. Staff has been needing more and more direction because we are seeing the difficulty in what we're doing. It's, to me, a conversation about gaps and opportunities and where are we going to tackle what will yield us the best results. There is no silver bullet. There is no one solution, singular solution. If not, cities would have done that, and we could have modeled that and copied that and done something different. The reality is that we're addressing individuals. We're talking about people. We're talking about individuals that have different reasons for how they fell into homelessness, that have different needs to come out of homelessness. And while the city has done a really good job, I think, over the years of sort of doing prevention and attacking the inflow and also thinking about how to get to housing first strategies, all across the nation, we have seen this growth of what is happening in this emergency crisis middle. And that is what we're experiencing here. And the great news is that I think we're all ready. We're at a place where we really want to tackle it together. I know that the team is ready to think about different types of solutions. You all urge us to do that, so that is helpful as we think about it. And as we continue down this path, I appreciate that it has not been a singular solution that has been brought forward, but rather let's really look at what our community needs. There are different opportunities. There are a breadth of different options out there. And coming back, and Tara, I am with you. I'm a practical woman. Coming back with practical solutions that say, let's really get to the nitty-gritty of how many folks are we helping to serve? What is the cost? What does that look like? What is the strategy? Because frankly, providing tents or providing even housing without the supports that's needed to keep people in housing is actually not helping at all. So there's a whole continuum of what we need to do here. And I'm just incredibly proud, despite the gaps that we have, despite the frustration that I know community is feeling, I am incredibly proud of this team that is really coalescing around how to do that and working in partnership with where you'd like us to go. But there are some policy considerations that we need your clear guidance and clear direction about where we need to go in the future. And I don't think we're here tonight. I don't know that we'll be there on April 13th, but I think that this all feeds into making sure we have common language, common understanding, a common vision of where we'd like to go, because it's then that we can say, all right, how do we get there? How do we get from A to Z? Because it will not be B. So I just appreciate it and appreciate the thoughtfulness by which you've brought the topic up and the consideration you have given to staff's expertise as well as we have talked about this.
Thanks, Nuria. So, Council, love to hear from each one of you. If you are inclined to say any final thoughts you have on this topic, you are, of course, free to pass if you've said your piece. And then if you could include, if you have any specific answers to, I think, one of the questions that Matt posed, which is, hey, as we're going into this conversation with the county, anyone want to suggest an approach or have a thought there? And so I'll just go down the line and you can pass or not. And then I want to sort of circle up on a plus delta on retreat planning and retreat having and get you out of here and back to your people. Rachel, would you like to go first?
Sure. First, I'd like to say I love it when we have no Roberts rules. Like tonight and like earlier, Junie was like, hey, Lauren, can you do blah, blah, blah? And it's just so refreshing. And I don't know if there are ways that we can do this more often, like during meetings. Like, can we suspend the rules and just talk amongst ourselves? Because I think we get a lot farther doing this. Sorry, Mayor. And I want to thank you all for just agreeing to have this conversation, which is at least 3 years overdue. So thank you for going along with it. Wanted to just touch on a couple things that I heard and clarify my understanding. One thing, like, it was mentioned that some other cities are building a lot of affordable housing. We are too, like that, to Kurt's point. I don't want to diminish our credit on I think being out front on that. And so appreciate the work that you do and agree with you that we want to do those pieces over and over and over. And I think the piece that I'm talking about are just the people aren't getting the housing yet. So it's kind of two different buckets, and you all do amazing work, and never trying to diminish that. So it's, yeah, we keep hearing that like doing a sanctioned encampment is not going to help with unsanctioned camping, and I hear Tara's point that like you would only like to do sanctioned if it's going to be no unsanctioned, and certainly that would be a hope and goal of mine, is that by providing, you know, A, we will have less of B, and I don't know why we couldn't either build a system that way or at least try for that it is better for people to be in housing or at least a tent and not in a creek that's near a creek that's prone to flooding or, you know, in parks and things like that. So I'm a little bit leery of the negativity in front of questioning that. You know, we do make the rules, so I think we can try and set them up to succeed the best that we can. And I understand Bob's concern about, like, we can't carry the whole world on our shoulders. I don't think we have to deal with that question quite yet, because we're not carrying it on our shoulders with sanction and camping yet. And hopefully we can build in a process that does address the concerns that you and Mark and I think Tara all had. And we'll note Denver has a good waiting list for their sites. They've got 50 tents at most sites, and they get like 2 cycles of people through the tents each year, and there's like 4 sites, I think. So, you know, we don't have to shoot for 25. It sounds like 50 is a pretty good number there. To Joe's point about 72-hour notice possibly going away, and the ripple effects of that, I assume that some of that would be a corollary of you can't be here, we're not going to give you 72 hours, but over here you can be for a month or whatever it's going to be, so that there is a you know, a loss in one spot but a improvement somewhere else. And it seems to me that it's okay for us as a city to have some boundaries and expectations for people in public spaces. And I think that's, you know, part of what we hear so much from the community is like it seems like there are no boundaries. And I think that you know, societies do have rules and boundaries, and that's okay for us to have that expectation and to enforce it. So I just want to say thanks again for the conversation. I think we're going to move in a good direction. And on the county stuff, I just think as part of that conversation, I want some of this to be separated out. And part of my concern, you know, all along has been like, we don't have control over the shelter. We don't have control over the HSBC guidelines and rules, really. So a lot of this falls to the city, and I would like us to have our own say in some of the stuff that's happening in the city that's a little bit separate. And so I just want to make sure that we are doing that part. And then I think we probably need some marching orders leaving this conversation, or like some direct guidance to the staff, I guess. And I think Nuria kind of asked that. So I would suggest that we maybe give whatever the legal mechanism is for, we would maybe, like, I think I heard consensus on an expert. And I think I heard a lot of interest in sanction or safe outdoor space. So I don't know how, you know, if one follows the other, or if we want to say, like, maybe we can kind of be pre-planning for the SOS and moving forward with the expert. But that would be my thought. Thank you all.
Thanks, Rachel. Bob?
Yeah, I'll just focus on process, because there's a lot of substance tonight, and we're going to do a lot more substance on April 13th and for many, many meetings after that, I suspect. But I am a little bit concerned about this whole meeting with the county thing and how that's going to work out. Because it sounds like April 13th is going to be the first of many of our own internal conversations with our staff. I don't know if the expert will be on board then, or maybe we'll give more direction on the expert, probably not. Kurt's shaking his head. That doesn't surprise me. But are we going to have a conversation just like kind of in front of the county commissioners, and are going to kind of sit there in the audience and go like, well, that's weird, that's interesting. I guess they're all over the place on that. We'll come back and check with you in 6 months. Or, I mean, because I don't see that we're ready to have an engaged conversation. First of all, I know there's county commissioners who don't want to talk exclusively about homelessness, and as of 3 days ago, they were still there. So maybe you have more information about that than I do. But regardless of whether they're willing to sit through a meeting with us that's only on homelessness, it would just be sitting through a meeting with us only on homelessness. And if all we want to do is have a conversation in front of them, that's fine. If we have a conversation with them, then I'm not sure what our ask is, what our tell is, what we're going to say to them, how that's going to work. It feels to me a little premature. I mean, if we have something we want them to do, we want something we want them to collaborate with us on. I don't think we even have an idea ourselves, let alone bringing in a second party. So I'm just throwing that out there. If you got some magic solution to this, Nuria, I'd love to hear it, because from a process standpoint, I just don't get that part. I get what we're going to do on April 13th, and I'm really excited about that. So thumbs up on all that. But I just don't know how the county commissioners come into this.
So I'll say that it depends, right? Originally, there had been an ask from council to see if we can have a conversation with our county commissioners just to talk generally about homelessness. Our county commissioners said, sure, we'd love to. We'd also love to have the opportunity to talk to you all about a variety of other subjects. We knew that this topic is deep and that it would take some time. And so we embarked on continue to try to schedule that. And scheduling with everyone is difficult, right? As the conversation has continued and deepened, and we know your interest in it, staff set a date for April 13th for at least staff to talk about what are our homelessness strategies. We'd also heard that from you as well, that there was an opportunity and there was a desire to call the question about what are we doing really? And this council body hasn't weighed in on it, right? So we moved that forward. The county has, at least to my knowledge, said, hey, if you're having that meeting, we would come in. We would love to break bread, frankly, with you. We'd love to have a conversation about that. Obviously, we want to limit, they would like to limit their conversation to what is happening generally on homelessness and the partnership that we have together, and would not, and I think that's a reasonable position for them. They wouldn't wade into issues that are really solely the city's issues to deal with. But certainly we share a lot of strategy, a lot of vision. We are part of this Longmont, Boulder County, Boulder Consortium, and there is a desire to say, hey, let's talk about that, and then have that conversation amongst yourselves. Do we still think that's the right thing to do? Is that, what are you thinking about? I don't know, encampments or safe parking, or what is coming across the county? So those are the kind of conversations and that level of framing that we are thinking about. If council, and it sounds like council may have that desire to go deeper and be more pointed about that, then happy to share that as we're preparing for that meeting, so that we all come prepared to have a different kind of conversation. But frankly, I also think that this is the first of potentially many. And it could be, where are we laying the foundation? Where are we? And sharing what that vision is, because even as we sit here amongst yourselves, there may be some commonality on some things and not commonality on other things. And so to your point, Bob, I don't know yet if you are at a common point of having a strategies agenda setting, but you are at a point where there are things that are on your mind that you want to talk to the county with. And I would suggest, if they're willing to come that day, that this is a great first conversation to have with them. I don't know if that helps you.
You know, it's funny when you said there are some things you agree on and some things you don't. They all agreed with that. Like every head was like, yeah, that's true. Lauren, do you have anything to add?
Thank you for that framing, Nuria. Personally, I would like to hear from the county if there are areas, you know, we've discussed sort of expanding services and filling gaps in various ways, and are there any places where they would come to the table and support that, or, you know, just feeling them out on that is something that's interesting to me, as well as, again, the shelter and just sort of what services are offered there, what hurdles there are, how we can make sure that that is best supporting the needs of our community. I did just want to bring up Nicole's point again about, I thought she had a good one about bringing in the consultant. While I still support that, I also do think that this is, you know, we are facing life and death issues for people, and so we need to still be moving forward with the solutions that we can be, you know, while we are also in the process of evaluating gaps and various other things. I don't think that those things are mutually exclusive. We can do both, hopefully.
Thanks, Lauren. Matt?
didn't quite know where this conversation was going to go when when the email was written and you go send, no takebacks. Wasn't sure, but I'm quite pleased with how everyone came to the table ready to have this conversation. So I just want to thank Rachel for partnering on that, because I think this was a great. This is good. This is better than I sort of expected, because I had no idea. I tend to, a couple things I've heard, and I'll echo what Rachel said, so I won't go too much, but it's clearly consultant I hear is a need, and then certainly safe outdoor spaces is there, and really addressing that tension with enforcement and a spectrum of safe places for our people in need to go. And it's not one or the other. So I really want to get to a place where we can reconcile some of those differences, because that's the tension that our community sees the most. So I think there's urgency there. I agree with Lauren, and then maybe by proxy also Nicole, how the chain works, that some of these needs are yesterday. So I don't think hiring a consultant pauses our efforts to lift some things up and get the ball rolling. And if the consultant says, terrible idea, I've got a better solution, fine, then we pivot. The one thing that we have to get good at or better at as a bureaucracy is making the pivot and not feeling like we have to think tank our way to a perfect solution. So the action of doing is also the action of learning, and it's okay to jettison ideas when they don't work, but holding ourselves up, waiting for that better solution is also not in the cards. So I think we can do both. So I just want to be just grateful to all of you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the next conversations. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Aaron.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks very much, Matt and Rachel, for bringing this forward. It's been a really productive conversation. I appreciate the chance to have it. And Kurt, thanks for all that you reminded us of the incredibly important and innovative work that our city is doing with our partners, our nonprofit partners, our county partners, and others. As we were listening to you last night talking about all the different efforts that are in flight, and I'm just so impressed, right? And as I look around at what some other cities are doing, where I would say on a per capita basis, I think we can stand up to just about anybody. And so really, really appreciate all that amazing work that you all are doing. So just to the point of the meeting with the county, what I would think about bringing to that is talking to them about how we can collaborate on the next phases of our work on this extremely difficult problem of homelessness in our communities, and hope to work with them to have some openness to look at the broad spectrum of needs and potential services that go along with them. We have, as a group with them in the Homeless Solutions for Boulder County, been very focused on housing. Of course, housing is the solution to homelessness. But we can't house everyone tomorrow, so how do we meet people where they are and provide some assistance to them while we're working on getting folks into housing? So I really do like this idea of bringing in an expert to look at our systems and look at the gaps and look at recommendations and what we could do next. And I'd really look to invite the county to go on that journey with us, and to include Longmont as well, who's already a partner, but also look to some of our other cities in Boulder County who I know care about these issues as well, and potentially we can do some additional partnerships there too, and then look for the funding streams necessary together on how we can make this happen. And because I look like Longmont is doing some things that we're not doing, and we're doing some things that Longmont isn't doing. So how can we collaborate more and tap each other's kind of operational capabilities to build more collaboration on these problems? So that would be the kind of conversation I'd be looking to have with the county, and I feel like that's a productive one that we could have, and hopefully there's an openness to those discussions. And then just the last thing I wanted to say is just to emphasize a point that's been made several times, and Tara, including by you, about that we really do need to also be bringing more mental health and substance abuse resources to the table here. It's an incredibly large part of the need and the solution. I'm really glad we're moving forward with the sober living home. I've been defending that via email on like a 3 times daily basis recently, because I do think it's such an important project. But we need to look for more opportunities like that, because we're never going to make we're never going to come to a full solution until we address those issues as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Aaron. Tara?
First, I want to give a shout out, thank you to the people in the community who might still be listening, who have been very patient in talking with me, who think differently than I do, and have been teaching me a lot of things and making me think of things differently than I have in the past. So, and also to Lauren, who said to me that we can't really move people without giving them a place to go. In fact, you've all said that to me, haven't you? You have. We need places for people to go. And so when I visualize what I would say to the, because we can't say, well, you can't stay here at the creek because we need our public spaces and then have nowhere. We've all agreed to that. So I like what you said, Kurt, that there's, I think it was Kurt or Joe, you're sitting, I don't remember who said it.
Practically twins.
They are, yes. And their shoes are different, so they're not twins. But there isn't just one thing. So which one of you said we have to have a multiple idea? Like, let's say we decide on a small sanction encampment of 25 or 50. Then we decide on the idea that I like modular housing. And, but we look into both of those as well because, you know, I like modular housing better. Okay, fine. And that is because I feel like it's more of a, for transitional housing, it feels closer to being like a home and less like a temporary space. And I feel it also gets people prepared to want to be in a home. So that's why I like that. So if you said to me, what would be your ask for the county? It would be for land for modular housing. And so I could visualize a collaboration because we don't have the resources to do it ourselves with the county or another city or however we decide with their land because we don't have, our land's very expensive. But then we would help and we would make this modular housing community. I could see that being a really good thing. And so that's what I want to ask the county.
Thanks, Tara. Nicole?
I was actually going to be Frank the Second in this discussion, so I'm going to be Frank the Second anyway. Maybe Frank Jr. So
Frankie?
Frankie. There we go. I'll be Frankie. So I have a few things, and it may take me a moment to read through my very written up notes as folks have been talking. I think one of the really important things we need to do, I heard a lot of folks talking about looking at the effectiveness of new things that we haven't tried yet. I would really love for us to think about looking at the effectiveness of things that we have tried. I really feel like at some point we need to have a heart-to-heart conversation, study session about our camping ban policy. It's something that we've spent or allocated about $5 million to over the last couple of years. And I don't know, right? This isn't coming from a bleeding heart liberal kind of place, which is where I think some folks in the community like to peg me, but it's really coming from a scientist who's, looked at some of the emerging research about these topics. And to me, it's not really clear that it's something that makes things better. And as we are using limited resources, are we using it in the most effective places now? I think that's an important thing. And I will also say this conversation has left me kind of sad. We've been talking about people, but not really with people. So no one around this table has lived experience of unsheltered homelessness in Boulder. It's a gap in my mind, and it doesn't feel good. I think you all know me well enough by now to probably have this Representative Ayanna Pressley quote memorized. But I will say it again one more time for the folks who haven't talked to me that much. That the people closest to the pain need to be closest to the power. And I think that we have a lot of folks who have experience with lived homelessness here, current and past. And until we're having conversations with them, I think we're really missing some of the best and the most effective solutions, the cheapest as well, to some of the things that are frustrating a lot of folks in our housed community right now. Folks tend to know what they and their peers need. And I don't mean this in terms of people who, are really high on meth or anything like that, right? I mean, folks have to kind of be in a good decision-making place to get there, but we have a lot of those folks, right? So anyway, I think that's sort of a really important thing for us to think about as well. I mean, I've heard some really great ideas around addressing trash accumulation, keeping bike paths clear, having porta potties so that people have bathrooms and places to live. I'd really like to see us start including folks who are out there in these solutions. And then I think, as we think about a consultant, how do we make sure that the consultant doesn't just lead to a strategy that's going to collect dust? Part of my concern is that the landscape is changing so fast, and with some of the new drugs that are coming out now, with the meth crisis, with fentanyl, with some of what other cities are seeing in terms of drugs being cut with fentanyl, I think we've got some really serious issues coming up. And what are we going to do if we have a consultant who gives us a strategy that is obsolete in a year and a half? And this, I think, is another reason it's important to include the folks who are living this experience now in our solutions, because they're the ones who are going to be seeing the changes that are happening and give us a heads up about some emerging issues. And then as far as the county and what we might have a conversation with them about, I really think it's important for us to get a handle on what problem we're trying to solve and what it is we want out of that discussion. And sorry, this is where I had to go to some sticky notes to try to figure out what I was going to say. And I think with this too, it's really thinking about where I think we agree is on what the impacts are to the community, right? I think we all have a good sense of what those impacts are on all kinds of different people in our community. And how are we addressing those impacts, right? How are we addressing the trash, the bike paths, the people who are freezing outside because it's so cold, some of those things. So anyway, what I would love to see with the county, besides understanding what problem we're trying to solve, is having a roundtable with folks who have lived experience. Like, I think that would be incredibly valuable to me, I think, to have us all together and listening to folks who are out there. And I think experience with providing services and things too could be really helpful. So that's, not sure if that's what everybody would like to see, but I would love to see that. And, I think for us as a community, we just really need to think about this issue is not going away. So what are we going to do? The climate crisis, economic crisis, all of this is kind of driving things to get worse, not better. What are we going to do with that? And how do we sit in that space where we don't have enough resources to address this all on our own? And what can we do to mitigate impacts?
Thanks, Nicole. Junie?
Oh, you got to me. I don't want to add any more to what I hear from my colleagues about the type of interactions that we want from the county, and I'm sure they're also working on these issues as well, and maybe they're not doing exactly what we want them to do, and maybe they have their own constraints as well. So I think bringing them into the room to be part of the conversation as well, and work with them in a way that is constructive, and knowing that they have their own constraints as well. So whenever that conversation is brought to fruition, I look forward to it and be part of that, whatever the solutions that we can find. I just don't have anything else I think I could add more than what I've heard tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Junie. So before we close this one out, I just want to double, triple, quadruple check that you're providing some sense to staff of what you hope they might do, which would not really be direction, Sandra. Are there any members of council who do not want staff to start thinking about bringing on a consultant to pursue this issue? Thank you. Are there any members of council that do not want staff to start exploring some options related to safe outdoor spaces? Okay, thank you. Okay. Take backs. Okay. Kurt, couple things that maybe sound like they might land on your team's plate. Any thoughts on capacity and such things related to pursuing a consultant and maybe some options for safe outdoor spaces?
I think my answer is going to be similar to what I mentioned earlier. I think we'll have to see how things develop with the day center. But certainly, you've put this as a priority for us, so we'll hopefully get to it in the near future. But in April, we may have an update as you know, what our capacity progress is around that as well.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. I'm happy to ask.
Can I speak to that? I mean,
Yes.
I think what the unit is or what people stay in, that's not going to, it doesn't preclude us looking at those types of things, yeah.
Nuria, any last thoughts on this one before we go to close out?
Nope, I appreciate the clarity and really do appreciate the conversation, and Kurt, your grace in figuring out how that fits into your work plan, because I know you got a lot on your plate.
You gonna say a thing before I say a thing?
Just second that, Kurt. Really appreciate, and Megan and Vicky, like, I know you all are super busy and you're doing all kinds of amazing work. Thank you for having this conversation with us.
If y'all want to jazz hands that up, I really love it when y'all do it. That makes me feel like we're at a party. Thank you so much. Kurt, seriously though, man, thanks. Council, I promised at the beginning that we would,
Missed an HHS team member, Elizabeth, back there.
do you know how many years ago I met Elizabeth Crowe in the state of Kentucky? Yeah, right? We have a whole thing. Uh-huh. I think we once sheltered from a tornado on an army base once together. Good times, good times. Okay, so planning a retreat is no small thing. There are, of course, all the logistics that staff just miracles up and makes it fabulous. But there's, as some of you know more deeply than others, a fair amount of work that the retreat committee does. And so always room for improvement, but also always room for celebration. So I'd like to ask you each to reflect on the following question. What's something that you really appreciated and enjoyed about this retreat? And what's something that you would hope to do differently or just hope to do at next year's retreat? Appreciating that maybe some of the faces will change, but plant some seeds for the future if you would. Plus Delta. What was the thing that you liked? And what is the thing that you might suggest as a change or addition next year? Yep, Rachel?
Maybe we go down the line again.
Happy.
But that goes so efficiently.
I'll popcorn around, but by volunteers, but we have to.
I like what Bob said earlier, that the staff presentations yesterday were delightful and informative, so that was great. I think that in future years, it would be good to give just better communication about the agenda and opportunity for council to give input on a fully formed agenda before we get together. But more importantly, just notice to the community. A lot of people said to me, "Oh, you have a retreat tonight?" We had not gotten that out well to the community in some way. That I guess I get a lot of strange looks from people. Like a lot of people who pay close attention. Like Bob and I were talking to somebody Tuesday night who usually sends a letter in and was like, "We had no idea that was this week."
Thanks, Rachel. Bob?
Yeah, I said what I thought was really great about last night, so I'm not going to repeat that. I think what we've done in most, if not all, the retreats that I've been involved in is we've had 2 or 3 touch-ins with council. And when I say with council, I mean at a council meeting, not just like somebody picks up the phone and calls somebody. And I thought those were really, really helpful because we, as a matter of fact, I think you've actually even facilitated some of those, Heather, right?
Yep.
And so I think I'd like to see us go back to that. I think at least 2 touches, one in maybe December, one in January, so that all of council can weigh in on the agenda, what it's looking like, what some of the exercises you might have us do. And so that when we get to the retreat, it's kind of a collaborative. The retreat committee can facilitate, and they can work with staff, they can work with you. But I think having the retreat committee check in with council in a very public way so that we can hear each other and the community can weigh in on what we should be talking about, I think it's something we should get back to, because I kind of missed that, and I kind of think this one ended up being a little bit chunky. Some of us, I think, were contacted by the retreat committee. Some of us were not. We didn't hear, regardless of whether we were contacted or not, we didn't hear each other's conversations, and so we ended up kind of in a scramble here the last few days about what are we going to talk about. And so I think we should get back to having maybe at least a couple touch-ins, including something maybe facilitated by you in this room, on TV, with everybody involved.
Thanks, Bob. Rachel really wants you to say
something. Thank you. Rachel said boards and commissions. Boards and commissions. In the past, we've also asked boards and commissions to weigh in on what they like us. I know this is a mid-year retreat, so maybe that's not. Maybe it's only the start one. Maybe that's mid-year. We could have that debate, but we didn't really solicit any input from our boards and commissions, at least not formally. And I like Rachel, I ran into a lot of people who said, "You're having a retreat," so we didn't do a very good job of I didn't even know until a couple days ago what we were going to talk about. And I think there are a lot of people in the community who just didn't know we were having a retreat or what it was going to be about. We didn't ask our boards and commissions. So I think we need to kind of get back to a little bit more transparency.
Appreciate that. And I think you might have stolen some of Matt's thunder. He was like, dang it, I was going to say that. But I'll let him find new thunder. We don't need to go down the line to someone else who's not Lauren wants to go next. That's fine. But if Lauren, you're ready, that's also fine. Junie's ready.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm going to be around next year for this. But I would say I've been to 3 retreats, and I'm sure everyone had done a great job who were part of the retreat committee, but I really enjoy this one. It feels quick, it feels efficient. I like that, and I really appreciate that. It's like you were thinking of working people, right? The Thursdays, it was on a working day. And then even today, it's again in the afternoon. So I really appreciate the efficiency of it all. And I don't know what it is, but this year it feels more alive. The last time, I think the COVID, and we were mostly on Zoom.
It was a sadness, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, and then it's here. It feels familiar because we used to have it, you know, that place over there. And is it North Boulder? And I just like this. It feels good. It really feels good. I don't feel tired. It warms my heart. So it was great, and it's always great to see you, Heather. So, but I'm not sure if there's anything I want to add as for what should happen next year. I think, you know, the next council will figure it out. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Next, Aaron.
So my favorite thing is that it's almost over. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. My
So
next favorite thing
sassy.
is that it didn't involve an 8 a.m. start time. That is actually untrue. But my real favorite thing was just last night. I thought was amazing. We learned so much, and the collaboration, seeing how tight this team works together was revelatory and really, really special. And then want to thank Lauren and Nicole for putting the work in to get this organized. So I really appreciate that. I think it has had a great feel to it. Thank goodness we're back in person.
Right?
It was so tough in previous years. And then my one suggestion, I'll echo the boards and commissions. I think it's good to hear from them every year. So I would really like to get that on make sure it stays on our every year calendar, not just our every 2-year calendar.
Thanks, Aaron. Matt?
Rachel and Bob took just about every one of my suggestions, so I won't
Should
echo
never
them.
let them go first in the future.
No, I don't mind. It
That's for next
saves a
year.
little oxygen.
Yeah.
So what I'll start with what I liked. Last night, I think sort of ubiquitously was the highlight. Not just the communication from staff, but it was the first time, at least on my time in council, that I've actually been in the same room with every director. And that was that was powerful. That was cool in the sense of feeling the family of the city of Boulder and all the pieces that go into it. So I will remember last night for a long time, because with the way our meetings are set up now, that may not happen for another year. So those will be a very infrequent joy to have. So that'll stick with me for a long time. So thank you, Nuria and the committee, for creating that space for last night, because it was pretty special. The only piece I'll add in terms of just, process was having a good long runway for us all to feel like we were part of creating this for ourselves. And so to me, that was the piece that I think was missing, is to really feel like we all had a big chip in making sure this was driven in a singular direction. And also that it was really focused on long-term strategy as a midterm retreat, without adding work plan items necessarily. We're really thinking about what's on the horizon, which retreats are typically used for. So I'm glad we were able to pivot to get that nice long breath on homelessness, which is kind of the defining issue for us this year going forward. So I appreciate the flexibility to do that.
Thanks, Matt. Tara. Oh, fine.
I want to agree with Junie that I was very thankful that it wasn't during the day, during the week, because until we get a raise from $12,000, I have to keep my regular job, and it's hard to take off that much time. So thanks for doing it during the night. I'm sorry we gave up our Friday nights. Thank you for doing that, people. And the weekend would have been good too, but thanks for that. people.
Lauren was ready. And I just want to make sure everyone heard Aaron say, the night's still young.
It's not over yet.
I really appreciated that we were able to take both a very wide look at what the city is working on and also delve deeply into a couple of items. I think that that was a nice balance. And I look forward to being actually officially able to put things on the work plan in our next retreat.
Thanks, Lauren. Nicole, last thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good one, Lauren. I'm just going to echo everybody else that, hearing from staff, hearing about the other 80% of the work that's going on, I think was really neat, and agree. It was just fun to be in community together in a way that we typically don't get to. As far as what to do different, I completely agree with folks about kind of, having more check-ins. I think it would be a really good idea to just build this into our regular agendas that, as the retreat's coming up, the 3 months before, at least once a month, we're, we've got 15 minutes or so to check in on that. So I think that would be really helpful. I think one of the other things we need to get clear on is when we're doing retreats and when we're doing midterm check-ins, because the retreat committee was going in with the expectation, no new work plan items. This is a midterm check-in. We're seeing, where things are at. So I think just having that clarity for the retreat committees will really help in the future. And, and I just want to kind of encourage us, this is kind of beyond this one debrief, but just in general, as we are noticing that, we're not getting the information we want, if there are conversations that, we want to have, if things are lacking, just reaching out and asking and saying, a month or two ago, like, hey, what's actually going on, with the retreat? I know we had a conversation, but haven't heard anything before then, just so that we know when there are things and we don't have to kind of react to them at the last minute, which I know creates a lot of work for staff as well as the folks involved. So I think just being more proactive about telling each other what we need, I think is a really helpful thing that we can do, not just for retreat planning, but for everything.
Thanks, Nicole. Nuria?
So I'll start in the reverse order, which I think clarity on what we want these to be. And so I'm new. This is my first in-person check-in with you all as I spoke to staff and I spoke to former council members. This notion of a full retreat is different, and the ask to boards and commissions was not an annual process all the time. It changed over time. And so I think the question for me is, and we can take this after a learning lesson, is what does this council body want to do every year? And happy to have that conversation with you all because there are different expectations and there were different things in the past that happened. So happy to take that as a learning lesson. But the thing I've really appreciated it, and I won't always comment on stuff because you've already seen how amazing they are. I get to see that all the time, and frankly, they're funny as hell. But being able to be with you all, and a little bit of what Rachel was saying, being able to be with you all in a setting that is more conversational, that is less about perhaps the order of business, less about the larger audiences that we're having. It's one of the reasons we said up front we were not streaming, and I know that people wanted to see it. We will be putting this on as usual. It didn't used to be that you even got video, and now we will be videotaping forevermore, and we will be posting this up. But it really is to create an environment that is more intimate, that is more casual, that is one that you can all speak more frankly in, that we can speak more frankly in. And I think that was evidence in the last 2 days, and I have really appreciated that. So I just thank you for allowing that space to happen as we move forward. And just thank Heather for I have come to really appreciate Heather's approach to facilitation and the manner in which she keeps us in line, she keeps us moving, she keeps it good humored, she keeps it upbeat, and have really just enjoyed that.
Thanks, Daria. Appreciate that, Council. I think I say this, some version of this every year, but I consider it a privilege that you trust me to be with you at these important times in your journey. So thank you once again for letting myself and Samuel just be a part of this. And I think it's another thing you've heard me say, and I say it everywhere. The City of Boulder staff is the highest performing organization I work with. And I work a lot of places with a lot of people, and they all do good work. But this group of humans, I don't know more people who do such high quality work and so much of it literally all the time. So it brings me great joy to see you get to know them better and to appreciate their work, because they're pretty tremendous. And I really enjoy my time with you, so thanks for having us. Mr. Mayor, thank you for letting me take over your job for one night. Delighted to give it back to you for all the future until maybe next year.
So my only objection to you taking over tonight is how bad you make me look, because you're so good at this. But I think we just need a round of applause for Heather and her extraordinary facilitation work. And then, so always a pleasure to work with you every year. And to echo what you say about the city organization, the City of Boulder, there is no better, more highly functional organization to be found, and it's an honor and a pleasure to work with you all every day. So,
and it's
deep
Friday night,
gratitude.
and the night's still young, friends.
Before we adjourn, before we adjourn, can I just give 2 additional shout outs? Alicia and Emily make this look easy. And do all the dinner, so apologies for not mentioning that earlier. And then behind the scenes, there's a whole group of people doing Channel 8 stuff that will then subsequently post this and keep us in microphone heaven at the moment. So thank you to all.